There are places in the world where time ceases to obey the usual laws. There, stones are remembered more than books. The wind sounds like an echo of forgotten civilizations, and every step seems to echo from the depths of millennia. Here, the past has not gone away. It is just waiting for someone to learn to hear it again. Scientists call these landscapes archaeological, geological, historical. But anyone who has ever stood among ancient ruins at sunset knows. These are not just stones. These are frozen moments, taken out of the flow of time. They seem to be drawn to themselves, as if they want to tell a story that does not fit into dates and measurements. We will go where the hands of history go astray, where civilizations flared up and disappeared, leaving behind scars in the earth and memories in the air. In each such place, time does not move forward. It spins, returns, lives its own life. This is how our journey will begin, to 25 points on the planet where man first realized that eternity can be touched by hand. Among the red rocks of southern Jordan, where the desert smoothly turns into stone gorges, hides one of the most amazing places on Earth, the ancient city of Petra. From above it seems like a mirage, but upon closer look it becomes obvious. In front of a person, there are not ruins, but a whole world carved into the rock, created by an unknown hand. Here, in the silence, time seemed to stand still. Stone and light play with each other, as if Petra exists outside the usual flow of history, frozen between eras, as a reminder that greatness and oblivion are separated by just one breath of time. The city was the capital of the Nabatean kingdom, a mysterious people who mastered the art of trade and stone architecture. There is almost no written evidence left about them. The Nabateans did not build temples from brick or wood. They turned the mountain into architecture, carving palaces, tombs, and sanctuaries directly into the sandstone. Petra grew up at the crossroads of the caravan routes that connected Arabia, Egypt, and the Mediterranean. Traders of incense, gold, and silk passed through here, and the city prospered thanks to their stops. The main entrance to Petra is the narrow Sick Canyon, about a kilometer long. Its walls rise tens of meters up, compressing space and plunging the traveler into silence. When the rays of the sun finally break through the chasm, the facade of Al-Khazne, the treasury, opens before your eyes. This building, more than 40 meters high, is carved from solid pink stone. Its columns, pediments, and niches appear to be antique, but no Greek or Roman architect left a trace here. All this is the creation of masters whose names are forgotten and whose technique is still controversial. Petra amazes not only with its beauty, but also with its engineering. Water, priceless in the desert, flowed here through canals, cisterns, and reservoirs carved into the rocks. The water supply system was so advanced that it allowed thousands of residents to live in the arid region. Archaeologists believe that it was thanks to these engineering miracles that the city could exist for centuries, despite climate disasters. But time still caught up with Petra. After trade routes shifted and earthquakes destroyed part of the city, life here gradually faded away. By the 12th century, Petra had disappeared from maps and chronicles. The world forgot about her for almost 600 years. Only in 1812, the Swiss traveler Johann Burckhardt, disguised as an Arab merchant, entered the Sick Gorge and saw the pink walls of the ancient city. For Europe, this discovery was a revelation, as if history itself had returned from oblivion. Archaeologists who have studied Petra call it the city without time. Here, everything seems unstable. The sun changes the shade of the stone, turning the walls from scarlet to gold, from purple to gray. Every hour illuminates the buildings in a new way, and it seems that the city lives in its own daily rhythm, which does not coincide with the human one. The sandstone from which the facades are carved is soft and has been shaped by the wind over the centuries. Petra literally moves, albeit slower than the eye can see. Scientists say Petra is a perfect example of the interaction of time and matter. Stone, succumbing to erosion, preserves architecture, but at the same time constantly rewrites it. Here, the boundaries between ancient and modern are blurred. Even archaeological layers cannot be clearly separated. What was created 2,000 years ago merges with what has been changed by nature over the past decades. For local Bedouins, Petra has always been a sacred place. They call it Al-Madina al-Wardiya, the Pink City. According to their legends, each stone holds the breath of ancestors, and the evening light represents souls returning home. And indeed, at dusk, when the tourists leave, there is silence in the city, in which you can hear the sand rustling on the slabs, and somewhere in the distance, the wind responds in the empty vaults. This is not an echo. This is the whisper of time. Modern archaeologists continue to discover new halls, tombs, and temples in Petra. Dozens of unexcavated buildings are hidden under the sand. Radar studies show that there are still entire levels of the city below the surface, invisible, as if carved into the very memory of the earth. Perhaps this is the main feeling that Petra gives to everyone who comes here. Here time does not disappear, but hides. It's just waiting for someone to find its way through the canyon again so it can hear its breathing. Petra is not just an archaeological site, but a mirror of human civilization. She reminds that everything created will one day disappear, but the stone, if you look at it carefully, continues to tell the story. Here, among the silent facades, the past has not gone away. It has simply become part of the landscape, part of eternity, in which a person is only a moment. On the western Deccan Plateau, not far from the Indian city of Aurangabad, there is a place where a stone seems to have turned into a prayer. Here, in a rock more than 2 kilometers long, dozens of temples, monasteries, and halls are carved out. All this forms the famous Ellora cave complex. Unlike other ancient structures, Ellora was not built. It was carved. People carved temples, staircases, and colonnades from a solid basalt massif, leaving untouched only that which was to become part of the architecture. This is one of the most amazing creations of mankind, where the border between art and nature has practically disappeared. The complex contains 34 caves, created between the 5th and 10th centuries A.D. They were built successively by representatives of 3 religions, Buddhists, Hindus, and Jains. This coexistence of faiths in one territory is unique. In Ellora, there are monasteries dedicated to Buddha, sanctuaries of Shiva, and temples glorifying the Tirthankars, teachers of Jainism. Each cave is a separate world, where every detail carries symbolism, and everything together adds up to an endless story about the search for spiritual liberation. The most famous of them is the Kailasanatha Temple, or simply Kailasanath. It occupies a central place in the complex and amazes not only with its scale, but also with its very idea. The temple was entirely carved out of the mountain from top to bottom. The craftsmen started from the top of the rock and gradually moved down, removing everything unnecessary. From this stone mass arose a whole architectural ensemble: a courtyard, galleries, obelisks, pavilions, and the temple itself, more than 30 meters high. According to archaeologists, about 200,000 tons of rock were extracted from the rock, and all this without the help of modern technology. When you first look at Kailasanatha, it is difficult to believe that it was created by human hands. Its facades are covered with thousands of carved figures, gods, warriors, animals, mythical creatures. Each scene is like a frame from a moving epic, frozen in stone. Particularly impressive is the panel depicting Shiva defeating the demon Ravana. The rock seems to tremble from hidden movement. Researchers are still debating how the craftsmen achieved such precision without metal tools or drawings. Not a single detail is out of proportion, and everything is subject to strict symmetry. Archaeologists believe that the construction of Kailasanatha took at least 2 decades. It was ordered by the ruler of the Rashtrakuta dynasty, Krishna I, who wanted to create an earthly reflection of Mount Kailasa, the abode of Shiva. However, the technology of cutting down temples itself dates back to an earlier period. Buddhist monks began to develop these rocks several centuries before the Hindus, carving vajras here, monastery cells and meditation halls. They used natural caves, gradually expanding them and giving shape to architectural spaces. Inside some of them, there are still traces of plaster and fragments of ancient paintings depicting scenes from the life of Buddha. When Buddhism gave way to Hinduism, the builders did not destroy the old sanctuaries. They simply continued to work nearby. This amazing coexistence of faiths became a symbol of tolerance and continuity, a rare example of cultural dialogue in the ancient world. The Jains, who came later, added their temples to the ensemble, distinguished by the fineness of carving and mathematical precision. Their ornaments are not just decoration, but a visual expression of philosophy, where everything is subordinated to harmony and balance. Ellora is not only an architectural phenomenon, but also a mystery of human will. Here time seems concentrated. Thousands of years merged into one stream. Culture was replaced by culture, but the hand of the master remained the same. The stone, in fact, became a chronicle in which the history of the spirit is visible, from contemplation to action, from prayer to creation. Modern researchers are studying Ellora using laser scanning and three-dimensional models, trying to understand how the builders calculated the proportions and the load. Calculations show that to carve the Kailasanatha temple alone would require more than 3,000 workers, working every day for 20 years. But this is not the most striking thing. The temple has no traces of errors. Not a single blow was in vain. Not a single element looks accidental. It's like a perfectly executed symphony, played on an instrument that no one has used before. Today, the Ellora Caves are a UNESCO World Heritage Site and are visited by thousands of people every year. But even among tourists, there is silence here. Inside the temples, the air is dense, saturated with the aroma of oil and stone dust. When you stand under the vault, it seems that time does not flow. It sounds. There is no beginning or end within these walls, only the rhythm of hammering blows that once created eternity. Ellora reminds us that a person is capable of not just building, but of carving time out of stone, turning the rock into the breath of prayer. In the south of Morocco, between the harsh Atlas Mountains and the sands of the Sahara, stands an ancient settlement, Qasr Ait Ben Haddou, one of those places where time seems to have turned into material. The clay from which the walls were built absorbed the breath of centuries, and the sun gave them the shade of molten copper. From above, this place resembles a terrace that has grown straight from the ground. The towers of the Kasbahs stretch to the sky. The streets bend like the lines of an old map, and at the foot, a seasonal river flows, separating the old world from the new. Ait Ben Haddou appeared at the intersection of caravan routes connecting the northern cities of Morocco with the depths of Africa. Merchants carrying salt, spices, and gold passed through these lands. The settlement served them as a shelter and fortress. The very word Qasr in Berber means a fortified city, a communal space where each wall belongs to everyone. Archaeologists date its beginnings to around the 16th century, although local residents are sure that the first walls stood here much earlier. The Qasr's buildings are made of compacted clay mixed with straw, a traditional mixture that local craftsmen call pies. This material does not survive centuries in immobility, it lives. Every season the walls crack and require maintenance, and every generation mixes the clay again, smooths it again, strengthens it again. So time becomes not a destroyer, but a participant. Qasr doesn't just stand, it breathes, renewing itself along with its inhabitants. The architecture of Ait Ben Haddou amazes with its harmony and thoughtfulness. The narrow passages are always cool, even in the midday heat. Thick walls hold out the night breath of the desert, and tiny windows let in only thin threads of light. At the top of the hill stands a tower, from which caravans used to be watched. Not a single line here is accidental. The village seems to have been carved out according to the rules of wind and sun. Each street led to the center, to a mosque and a collective granary where grain and supplies were stored. Over the centuries, life here flowed in its own rhythm. Caravans were replaced by rare travelers, merchants by craftsmen, but the Ksar did not disappear. It has survived droughts, floods, and times when people moved into the valley to build new houses out of concrete. The clay walls were destroyed, but the inhabitants returned, restored them, and this continued again and again. Today, only a few families live inside the old walls. The rest have settled across the river, but all of them still call Ait Ben Hadu their heart. When you look at it from afar, especially at sunset, it seems that the settlement is burning with a soft inner light. The sun's rays fall on the walls, turning them into gold, and the shadows from the towers stretch along the slopes like ancient writing. This light is the breath of time. It connects centuries, makes the modern and the ancient inseparable. Ait Ben Hado is included in the UNESCO World Heritage List, not only for its beauty, but also for the fact that it remains a living testimony to a culture that knew how to build, not in spite of nature, but with it. Here, everything is subordinated to earth and light. There is almost no stone, only clay, water, and labor. And in this Ksar, time does not move forward. It rotates, returning to the same hands that knead the earth again and again to hold the shape of the world. Legends say that every morning, when the first ray of sun touches the top of the tower, the spirits of the ancestors wake up and walk through the streets, checking whether the walls are standing and whether the vaults are destroyed. Maybe it's just a fairy tale, but when the sun actually rises above the Atlas and the smell of hot dust fills the air, the past and present seem to go hand in hand. Ait Ben Hadu is not a ruin, not a museum, but a mirror in which you can see how time lives when it is not divided into eras. It settles in the clay, shines through cracks, moves in every reflection of the sun on the walls. Here everything returns, everything repeats itself, and that is why this place seems eternal. In the evening, when the sun sets behind the hills, the Ksar slowly darkens, and its silhouette merges with the ground. The wind goes around the walls, as if testing their strength, and for a moment there is silence, the same one in which the breath of time can be heard. On the island of Crete, among olive groves and dry hills, lie ruins that seem to remember not just history. They remember the very birth of civilization. This is the Palace of Knossos, the oldest architectural labyrinth in Europe, created more than 4,000 years ago. Its walls saw the dawn of Minoan culture, a mysterious world that disappeared long before the Greeks, but left a strikingly modern legacy. Everything here seems alive, even the stone. When you walk along the corridors, where the shadow glides over the red columns and faded frescoes, it seems that time has not passed. It has simply stopped to breathe along with the wind of the Aegean Sea. Knossos rises on the hill of Kefala, near the modern city of Heraklion. Its history begins around the 20th century BC, when the Minoans, the people of the sea and the light, created their center of power and ritual here. But a palace, in the usual sense, is not just a residence. This is a whole organism, a complex of halls, courtyards, corridors, and sanctuaries, intertwined so that every step leads to a new mystery. Archaeologists find an amazing feature in this place. The architecture of Knossos is not subject to symmetry, but to rhythm. It seems to breathe. Turns, stairs, transitions form movement, not structure. When British archaeologist Arthur Evans began excavations in the early 20th century, he was struck by the scale and elegance of the complex. More than 1,000 rooms connected by courtyards and staircases form a network where it is easy to get lost. It was from here that the myth of the labyrinth and the Minotaur arose, a monster locked in the dungeons of the palace of King Minos. But if myths speak the language of fear, then the reality of Knossos speaks the language of harmony. There is no heaviness of darkness here. On the contrary, architecture strives for light. Every window, every gallery is built to let in the sun. Light is the main element of the palace, symbolizing the presence of the divine. The walls of Knossos were painted with frescoes, some of the most vibrant that have come down to us from antiquity. They show scenes with people, bulls, the sea, and plants. This is a world where life and celebration merge into one. The Minoans depicted not gods, but the very joy of existence. Young men performing acrobatic jumps over bulls, girls with dark eyes dancing among lilies, dolphins swimming over doorways. In these images there is no war, no conquest, only movement and color. And this makes Knossos almost alien in spirit for its time, a civilization built not on fear, but on beauty. But behind this ease hid a strict organization. The palace had running water, sewerage, and ventilation systems, achievements that Europe would reinvent only 3,000 years later. Rainwater flowed through the canals, and clay pipes supplied the rooms with cold and freshness. Even the columns here are unique. They taper towards the base and not towards the top, contrary to all the laws of architecture, as if personifying an inverted perception of the world, where the familiar takes on a different meaning. At the top of the hill were the halls of the royal family, sanctuaries, and the throne room, where an alabaster chair is still preserved. Its back is carved in the shape of stylized waves, a symbol of the sea on which the life of the island depended. It was here, according to legend, that King Minos held court and brought gifts to the gods. The underground vaults found under the palace still contain traces of huge vessels for oil and wine, amphoras that could fill an entire temple. The death of Knossos came suddenly. Around the 15th century BC, a volcanic eruption on the island of Thera, now Santorini, caused a powerful tsunami, earthquakes, and ashfalls that destroyed large parts of Crete. After this, the Minoan culture gradually faded away, but the very idea of Knossos, the idea of architecture in which space reflects the human mind, survived the disaster. Today, the ruins of Knossos are open to visitors, and anyone who walks along the stairs, where the polished steps shine from thousands of steps, feels a strange presence. The wind passing through the empty corridors sounds like the breath of time. On the walls, you can see traces of paint that once burned brighter than the sun, and this faded color has a special power. It reminds that time does not destroy. It transforms. Knossos is not just a site of archaeology. This is the place where man first learned to make space a reflection of himself. Here, among the red columns and labyrinths, you feel the ancient world whispering to us. To understand the future, you need to learn to follow your own footsteps. Among the humid jungles of northern Cambodia, where vines close into green walls and the air smells of earth and water, lie ruins that seem to have been created not by people, but by nature itself, which decided to play with architecture. This is Angkor Thom, the great city, the heart of the ancient Khmer Empire, where stone and time are intertwined so closely that one can no longer be separated from the other. When the first Europeans set foot here in the 19th century, they thought they had found the Atlantis of the jungle. The towers, carved from gray sandstone, sank in the shadow of giant trees. Roots stretched along the walls like hands holding the past, and from the dense foliage, giant stone faces looked out, calm, detached, as if they knew something that no one else knew. These faces are the face of Buddha, lotuses and eternity, carved by masters whose names are forgotten, but whose art is timeless. Angkor Thom arose during the time of King Jayavarman VII, a ruler who combined power and faith. He conceived the city not as a fortress, but as a reflection of the heavenly world on earth. The entrances were decorated with gates, above which towered towers with 4 faces facing all directions of the world. Each of them is the embodiment of calm, compassion, and knowledge. Caravans, monks, warriors, and pilgrims entered the city through these gates. Behind the walls, a world opened up, where everything was built according to cosmic laws. The Bayon Temple in the center symbolized the universe, and streets and canals diverged from it like rays of the sun. Bayon Temple is the heart of Angkor Thom. There are more than 100 towers, and each one has faces carved into it. They look east and west, north and south, as if watching the passage of time. The stone halls are decorated with reliefs. Thousands of figures tell stories of wars, markets, holidays, and rituals. But the longer you look, the less you understand where the story ends and the myth begins. Some bas-reliefs depict scenes from everyday life: fishermen pulling nets, women trading in markets, children playing by the river. Others show battles between gods and demons, rotating Mount Meru to churn the ocean of immortality. And it seems that in the eyes of the masters, there was no boundary between the earthly and the heavenly. Everything was part of one breath. Over the centuries, the jungle slowly reclaimed this peace. The roots of banyan trees and mulberry figs grew between the blocks, breaking through even the strongest foundations. Where prayers had once sounded, water was now dripping. Ferns grew where the torches burned, and yet Angkor Thom did not die. It did not collapse, but simply changed shape, taking in the breath of the tropics. Stone and plant have grown together in symbiosis, like body and spirit. Modern archaeologists say that this union is the reason for its survival. Where the roots gripped the walls, they kept them from falling. Where the leaves covered the masonry, the sun could not destroy the surface of the reliefs. Nature has become the guardian of what man once created. When you stand in silence at the foot of Bayon, where from the jungle you can hear only the cry of a peacock and the rustling of water in the canal, you feel how the usual sense of time is leaving. Here it does not flow but pulsates, as if it lives in every leaf, in every crack, in every face on the tower. These stone gazes are not just decoration. It is the embodied idea of observation, memory looking at itself. Since ancient times, Angkor Thom was considered a place where a person could get closer to enlightenment, because here the boundary between internal and external disappears. You are walking along the stairs, the steps of which have been worn out by thousands of feet, and suddenly you notice that there is no difference between your breath and the breath of the forest. Everything around becomes part of the same rhythm, and perhaps this is how the ancient priests understood eternity, not as an infinity of years, but as a moment in which there is neither beginning nor end. Today, scientists are reconstructing this complex based on stone, traces of tools, and moss, which grows on some walls faster than on others. But not a single plan, not a single 3D model conveys the main thing: how time flows here. In Angkor Thom, it does not go forward and does not come back. It circles in the air, in the fog, in the singing of cicadas, and it seems that everything that has ever happened here is still happening now. Angkor Thom is neither a ruin nor a museum. This is the living heart of the stone, in which the breath of centuries is hidden. Here time does not destroy, it transforms. In the southeast of Algeria, where the Sahara turns into a rocky ocean, one of the most mysterious places on the planet is hidden: the Tasilin Ajer Plateau. Here the sand gives way to rocks carved by the wind, and on these rocks traces of time are visible that cannot be measured by a calendar. At first glance, it is a barren desert, a dead world, where the day lasts forever and the night knows no stars. But as you get closer, another reality reveals itself beneath the layers of weathered sandstone, ancient drawings left by people who lived here when the Sahara was still green. Thousands of images of animals, people, Hunts, dances, and unknown creatures cover the walls of the gorges like a giant chronicle of a civilization that disappeared long before the first cities. According to archaeologists, the age of some of the images reaches 10,000 years, a time when these lands were not a desert, but a blooming savanna, crossed by rivers and covered with forests. On the walls are depicted giraffes, elephants, hippos, animals that are impossible to imagine in the current hell of heat and sand. This is not just rock art, it is a document of how the Earth itself has changed. The plateau stretches for hundreds of kilometers. Stone arches, pillars, and towers create a landscape reminiscent of a fantasy city carved by the elements. Hidden in these stone labyrinths are more than 15,000 drawings and engravings made with pigments that have survived despite time. Scientists identify entire eras in them. The period of hunters, when people depicted animals with whom they shared space. The period of pastoralists, where scenes of pastures, dances, and rituals appear. But there is something else. Images that do not fit into any system. People with round heads, huge eyes, and strange costumes, as if they came not from the past, but from a dream. Many researchers have tried to explain these figures. Some consider them shamans in ritual masks, others manifestations of religious visions. Some see in them evidence of an ancient cult associated with space and the contemplation of the sky. Indeed, on the Tasilin Ajer Plateau, traces of ritual sites have been found more than once, where the lines of stones are oriented according to the sun and stars. Perhaps here people first began to understand the connection between earthly time and the celestial cycle. But even if you leave aside the legends, the place itself seems to be woven from eternity. The rocks are weathered as if someone carved them with artistic intent. At dawn they turn red, by midday they lighten to gold, and at sunset they turn into black silhouettes stretching into infinity. The wind here speaks its own language. It polishes the stones and erases traces, but does not touch the paint, as if respecting the memory of those who wrote. In the mid-20th century, the French explorer Henri Lot arrived here. He and his team spent several years on the plateau, opening one sanctuary after another. Since then, Tasilin Ajer has been called the largest gallery of primitive art on the planet. But like any place where time loses its shape, the plateau is in no hurry to reveal its secrets. Even with modern technology, it is impossible to determine how ancient artists climbed sheer walls or how they created paint that has not faded over the millennia. Scientists have found traces of ancient sites, the remains of fires, flint tools, fragments of vessels. Everything suggests that people lived here and watched the climate gradually change. Perhaps it was Tasilin Ajer that became the place where humanity first encountered the idea of the irreversibility of time, when the green plains turned to sand and the animals disappeared, leaving only shadows on the stone. These walls are a chronicle of extinction, written by nature itself with the hand of man. Currently, access to the plateau is limited. Only researchers and rare travelers who are willing to walk tens of kilometers across lifeless expanses get here. Those who have been here say that the feeling of loneliness is not frightening. It is cleansing. Here, among ancient stone and wind, a person ceases to feel like the center of the world. Everything that seems important dissolves, leaving only the breath of the earth and the memory of how long it has lived without us. Tasilin Ajer is not just an archaeological site. This is a place where the past becomes visible, where the planet itself speaks through stone. Here you can see not only what was, but also what will inevitably be. The transformation of life into sand, and sand into history. When the sun sets below the horizon and the shadows stretch all the way to the sky, the drawings seem to come to life. People, animals, unknown figures move in the soft light, as if time decided to return for a moment and remind, everything has already happened, everything will happen again, and everything will remain here, on the walls, as long as there is light, and the breath of the wind. In the heart of Anatolia, in the very center of modern Turkey, lies a place where the earth seems to forget its own laws. This is Göreme, a valley and city carved into stone, where people have lived for thousands of years inside rocks created by the fire of ancient volcanoes. Here, everything looks as if the world is frozen between sleep and reality. The rocks grow like towers, the walls breathe light, and a whole invisible city hides underground in which centuries exist simultaneously. When you look at Cappadocia from above, it seems as if you are looking at the surface of another planet. Valleys of pink tuff, needles, and columns are the result of eruptions that occurred millions of years ago. Streams of lava and ash covered the land, and wind and rain carved them into fantastic shapes over the centuries. This is how the famous stone mushrooms appeared. Columns with flat tops, in which ancient people saw not just a shelter, but a continuation of nature itself. They did not build, they cut, as if freeing dwellings from the body of the earth. Göreme became the heart of this world. Here, every hill hides a cave, and behind every cave is a trace of life going back centuries. The first settlements appeared during the time of the Hittites, long before the advent of Christianity. People, escaping the heat and winds, carved out houses, folded steps, cut out windows, forming entire villages connected by passages and stairs. But over time, underground labyrinths became more than just houses. They turned into shelters. During early Christianity, Cappadocia became a refuge for those fleeing persecution from the Roman Empire. Here, under a layer of soft stone, the monks created temples, chapels, refectories, and painted the walls with frescoes that still shine today. These frescoes are real prayers, captured in color. Red, ochre, deep blue tones depict angels, scenes from scripture, symbols of light. And although time has erased much, the lines still breathe. You can feel the hand of a man in them, praying not to heaven but to the very earth in which he took refuge. Entire underground cities are hidden under Göreme. The most famous, Kaymakli and Derinkuyu, stretch tens of meters down, connecting with the Göreme system through underground tunnels. Archaeologists believe that thousands of people could have taken refuge here. In the depths of the earth, kitchens with stone millstones, ventilation shafts, wells, livestock chambers, and even wineries have been preserved. Everything is designed so that you can live underground for months. The tunnels were closed with stone doors that could be rolled from the inside, and the enemy would not be able to open them. These stone circles are like eyes closing to ride out the storm of time. Today, researchers believe that such cities arose not only out of fear, but also out of a philosophy of survival. In Cappadocia, too many centuries have passed under the sign of disasters. Earthquakes, wars, droughts. People are accustomed not to fight the elements, but to merge with it. They learn to inhabit what the earth gave, turning stone into protection and home. Here, man is not the master of nature, but its reflection. When the archaeologists call Göreme an open-air chronicle. Each layer is a chapter, each crack is a word written with rain and fire. But behind scientific terms, there remains a feeling that cannot be described by facts. When you enter one of the ancient temples, illuminated only by a beam falling from a round hole in the ceiling, the air seems still. The dust swirls slowly, and each particle is perhaps a trace of someone's breath left centuries ago. Göreme is a place where time became architecture. It flows not by the clock, but by the cracks of the stone, not by the dates, but by the layers of paint on the frescoes. Here, the past has not gone away. It just sleeps in the walls, waiting for someone to touch and hear again. When you leave the valley, towers and domes of stone remain behind you, and for a moment, it seems that they are looking after you. In their silence, there is not peace, but the breath of eternity. In the tropical forests of southern Mexico, where the air is heavy with moisture and the trees intertwine into an impenetrable wall, there lie ruins that seem to be waiting for someone to learn to understand the language of stone again. This is Palenque, a city of the ancient Mayan civilization hidden from the world for many centuries, a place where fog, greenery, and time are intertwined into one breath. Here, history is not just forgotten. It is dissolved in the noise of the jungle, in the cry of birds, in the rustling of leaves, where every movement reminds of the cyclical nature of life. When the Spaniards first set foot on these lands, the city had long been swallowed up by nature. Only in the 19th century did explorers break through the thicket and see before them not ruins, but a dream woven from stone and moss. Pyramids, palaces, stepped platforms rose from the ground as if the forest itself had decided to build a temple. Everything was covered with roots, but there was no destruction in their grip. On the contrary, the plants carefully held the stone blocks, as if protecting the memory of what had once been the center of life here. Palenque was founded long before the fall of Tikal and other Mayan cities around the 5th century BC. But it experienced its heyday later, under King Pakala the Great, a ruler whose name became a symbol of enlightenment and power. It was under him that the famous Temple of Inscriptions, one of the most mysterious buildings of the ancient world, was erected. Its walls are covered with writings telling about the genealogy of the kings, about the gods, about time and its circulation. These inscriptions are not just text, but a living memory mechanism in which every word is part of the calendar, every sign is a unit of eternity. Inside the temple, archaeologists discovered the sarcophagus of Pakal, decorated with bas-reliefs, which are still controversial today. The lid is carved with an image of a king descending into the underworld and at the same time ascending into the sky. Some see this as a cosmogonic myth, others as a symbol of the transition between worlds, and others as an ancient idea of the rebirth of the universe. But everyone agrees on one thing. This stone contains the idea of time, which does not move in a straight line but rotates, returning to the beginning, like the sun rising over the jungle every day. The architecture of Palenque amazes with its soft proportions and attention to light. Unlike other Mayan cities, where the buildings seem massive and severe, there is an almost musical rhythm here. The stone is laid so that the shadows change smoothly throughout the day. Through openings and light galleries create a feeling of movement, as if the city itself is breathing along with the air of the forest. When the first light breaks through the foliage at dawn, it falls on the walls, and it seems that Palenque is awakening, like a living creature. The Mayans believed that their cities were not just human dwellings. They were reflections of the cosmos, aligned with the stars. The central pyramids corresponded to the positions of the planets, and the courtyards served as sites for rituals associated with calendar cycles. Palenque is one of the rare cities where this harmony is felt physically. Here, everything is subordinated to number, rhythm, and the breath of time. Even the noise of the jungle seems to be part of this orchestra, endless repeating in which there is no beginning or end. When archaeologists cleared the temple of its centuries-old roots, they discovered not only frescoes and writings, but also traces of paint. The walls of Palenque were painted red, blue, and green, colors symbolizing the elements. Over time, the paint has faded, but in some places it still glows in the morning sun, as if time has decided to leave a reminder of its presence. Today, Palenque is one of the few places where you can hear the past speak in a whisper. You just have to freeze, and from the depths of the forest you can hear the sound of dripping water, the singing of birds, and the quiet hum of insects. All this creates a strange feeling, as if the city did not disappear, but simply fell asleep. Sometimes it seems that priests in white robes are about to appear around the corner, carrying gifts to the temple, and the wind will again raise dust, like thousands of years ago. In the evening, when the sun goes down behind the mountains, a damp fog rises above the forest. The stones turn golden, the leaves turn almost black, and the air is filled with the aroma of clay and flowers. At this moment, Palenque resembles not ruins, but a gateway between worlds, Everything around you freezes, and in this silence you feel that time has not passed. It has simply dissolved in the greenery, in the stone, in the air that breathes along with the forest. Palenque is not a remnant of the past, but proof that history does not disappear. It simply changes shape, hides in the roots, in the water, in the air, so that one day it will appear again. And when a ray of sun falls on the carved face of Pakal, it seems that the ancient king opens his eyes, not because he comes to life, but because time has closed the circle again. On the border of Peru and Bolivia, at an altitude of more than 3,000 meters above sea level, lies a lake that seems not to be part of the earth, but a fragment of the sky. This is Titicaca, the oldest and most mysterious alpine lake on the planet, a sacred place for the Andean peoples, the cradle of myths reflecting the very birth of time. Here, water and air become one creature, transparent and cold, as if frozen between worlds. When you stand on its shore, it seems that you are not looking into the distance, but down into a mirror where the sky and the memory of the earth itself are reflected. Legends say that the first people emerged from the depths of Titicaca. The god Viracocha rose from the waters, illuminated the darkness, and created the sun, moon, and stars. Since then, the lake has become a symbol of the beginning, the point where time first moved forward. But the strange feeling here is that everything seems eternal. The water has no beginning, the mountains around have no end, and the wind seems to carry the voices of those who lived here thousands of years ago. Scientists say that Titicaca is the remnant of an ancient inland sea that existed long before the advent of man. The bottom of the lake contains sediments that are millions of years old. These layers contain traces of climate change, movement of the Earth's plates, disappeared rivers, and ancient civilizations. Geologists call it the archive of the Earth, because here, in the water and mud, evidence of every era is preserved. But Titicaca preserves not only geological, but also human memory. On its shores, peoples flourished, about whom for a long time they knew only from legends. Even before the Incas, the Pucara and Tiwanaku cultures existed here. Their cities, temples, and stone platforms are still visible in the valleys, and some of the buildings rest underwater. At the beginning of the 21st century, archaeologists discovered ruins, stone walls, and traces of ancient roads at the bottom of the lake. These finds confirmed what the elders had said. Once the water level was lower, and people walked on these lands. Particularly mysterious are the underwater platforms, smooth, geometrically laid-out blocks, similar to the foundations of temples. Scientists argue who they belong to, but one thing is clear. The people who created them had the knowledge that allowed them to build at a height where breathing is thin and the cold corrodes all living things. Here, in this thin air, the human and the natural are completely intertwined. На поверхности озера, словно по воле ветра, дрейфуют плавающие острова Урос. These islands are made from totara reeds that grow along the shores. Locals create them by hand, layer by layer, adding new layers every few months to keep the island from sinking. This is a living dwelling, constantly renewed, like the lake itself. People here live in direct union with water. They build houses from reeds, cook food using reed fuel, and travel on water in boats made from the same stems. In their life, there is no separation between nature and man. Everything that is created from the breath of Titicaca. But the sacredness of this place is not only in its antiquity and beauty. Titicaca is the point where reality seems to lose density. At dawn, the water turns into a mirror in which the horizon line is not visible. The sky and the lake become the same color, and it is impossible to understand where you are standing, on the ground or in the air. Sounds die out, and light acquires a strange viscosity. Travelers say that at these moments, time seems to hold its breath. Everything that was, everything that will be, dissolves in this transparent stillness. On the island of the Sun, located closer to the Bolivian coast, the ruins of an ancient sanctuary have been preserved. Here, according to legend, the first people sent by Viracocha appeared. Massive stone terraces descend to the water, and between them are traces of stairs leading to nowhere. Everything is imbued with a sense of beginning. Here, time does not move forward, it returns to the source. Even the sun's rays at sunset fall as if they touch the water carefully, afraid to disturb the peace. Archaeologists say that the level of Titicaca changed many times, rising and falling like the breath of a living being. Возможно, именно это дало рождение мифу о вечном круге. Here, each wave carries not sound, but memory. Here, every stone is not just a part of the shore, but a fragment of a chronicle written by water. When you look at Titicaca from above, it seems that the lake really lives. It doesn't reflect the sky. It holds it. And if you look into the surface for a long time, you can feel how the usual sense of time disappears. Everything becomes silence, a space without boundaries, a reflection of what never disappeared or began. Titicaca is not just a lake. This is a watery icon of the world, where the past and the future sleep side by side, covered by the same breath of mountains and wind. On a high plateau above the ancient city of Cusco, under a sky where the air is clear and cold, cyclopean walls rise, as if left by creatures who mastered an art long lost by people. This is Sacsayhuaman, one of the most mysterious creations of the Incan civilization, a place where granite and time entered into an alliance that is indestructible. Here, each stone weighs as much as no modern crane can lift, but they are fitted to each other with such precision that it is impossible to insert even a knife blade between them. When you stand in front of these walls, the first feeling is not surprise, but silence. The stone does not look dead. It seems to breathe, shimmers with shades of gray, and changes with the sun. In the morning light, it appears bluish. By midday, it appears silvery, and in the evening it turns black, as if absorbing the night. And yet there is no heaviness in this greatness. Sacsayhuaman does not suppress. It attracts, like something living, growing from the earth itself. Scientists are still arguing about how the Incas were able to build something like this. Not a single written source has survived, and legends speak only of stone masters who knew how to soften the rock, giving it the desired shape. The reality, of course, is simpler. Wooden levers, ropes, and thousands of workers were probably used. But a simple explanation does not cancel the miracle. After all, the accuracy of the masonry remains unattainable today. The stones in the walls are not the same. Each has its own shape, and this is precisely the secret of strength. They are not lined up like bricks. They are interlocked, like parts of a living organism. 3 giant terraces rise in ledges, forming the shape of battlements, similar to lightning or a snake. Возможно, это символ божества, покровителя мудрости. Archaeologists believe that the entire complex was not only a fortress, but also a temple dedicated to the sun god Inti. Rituals associated with the solstice took place here, and perhaps it was from here that the sacred roads leading to different parts of the empire began. But there is another feeling, as if Sacsayhuaman was not a defensive structure or a temple, but something more than the very idea of human construction. When the Spaniards first saw these walls, they did not believe that the Incas could have built them. Chronicler Pedro Cieza de León wrote that, "There is nothing in any country in the world that can be compared with these miracles." The conquerors tried to dismantle part of the fortress in order to use the stones to build houses in Cusco, but they soon realized that this was almost impossible. The stones were too big, too dense, too connected to each other. Even after centuries, nature could not destroy their connection. Earthquakes that caused colonial churches to collapse left the walls of Sacsayhuaman undamaged. At the top of the plateau, traces of towers, wells, and canals are still visible. Everything is laid out with mathematical precision, as if the architects had not only engineering knowledge, but also a sense of rhythm. There is a sense of balance in every line, as if the architecture was built not for the eyes, but for the breath. When you walk along the walls, you feel that the space is subject to an invisible order. Sacsayhuaman is perceived not as a ruin, but as a piece of music performed in stone. For the Quechua people, this place is sacred. They call it the House of the Sun, and believe that it contains the power of their ancestors. Every year on the day of the winter solstice, the Inti Raymi festival, the rebirth of light, takes place here. With the first rays of sunrise, people in traditional clothes offer gifts, sing ancient hymns, and the sun really seems to respond. In these moments, past and present merge. On the top of the hill, the same language that was heard thousands of years ago is heard, and it seems that time becomes a circle again. Modern research has shown that the Sacsayhuaman blocks are composed of limestone, andesite, and diorite, rocks quarried from different locations. Some stones were brought from tens of kilometers away, dragged along steep slopes. This work is almost impossible for the imagination, but it is precisely in it that the meaning lies. The Incas built not for the sake of demonstrating strength, but for the continuation of life. Their architecture was a form of prayer. Stone became a way of communicating with the earth, and precision a sign of respect for its breath. Когда заходишь в тень одной из стен, тишина кажется плотной. You can only hear how the wind rolls the grass and how somewhere in the distance the cry of a hawk breaks the stillness of the sky. In moments like these, it becomes clear that Sacsayhuaman is not just a vestige of a former empire. This is a message left by those who knew. Everything on earth is subject to destruction, except that which is built with love and in accordance with time itself. In the evening, when the sun sets behind the peaks of the Andes, the stones seem to glow from within. They heat up during the day and give off the warmth of the night, like a memory that does not fade away. And in this soft light, one can believe that the walls are really alive. After all, Sacsayhuaman is not a monument, but the breath of a civilization that has managed to capture eternity in matter. In northern Ethiopia, among the dry hills and warm winds, lies the place that ancient chroniclers called the Heart of Africa. Aksum is a city where the trade routes of Egypt, Arabia, and India once crossed, where gold and ivory were exchanged for incense and silk, where time flowed not in watches, but in stone. Here, in a land saturated with iron and sun, born for eternity, stands one of the most mysterious monuments of the ancient world, stone obelisks, slender, like frozen rays of light, and as ancient as history itself. The Aksumite civilization arose long before the rise of Rome, and long after its fall remained the strongest kingdom in East Africa. It was from here that the Christianization of the continent began. From here caravans spread to the Red Sea, and here, according to legend, the Ark of the Covenant was brought, a shrine that disappeared from Jerusalem. The city maintains a legend to this day that in one of the temples it stands under the cover of eternal secrecy, and no one except the appointed guardian has the right to even look at it. And yet there is more real than mythical in Aksum. Each stone here speaks the language of engineering and spirituality, merging the earthly and the heavenly. The main symbol of the city is the obelisks. The highest of the surviving ones reaches more than 20 meters, and this is only what remains of its former splendor. Once upon a time, dozens of such pillars, carved from monolithic granite, stood on this plateau. They were not just monuments, they were stone portals between worlds. On their surface are carved images of false windows and doors, floors, arches, ceilings, as if the craftsmen were creating not an obelisk, but a model of an ideal home for the soul. It was believed that the spirit of the deceased king ascended these symbolic floors, moving from one state of being to another. The mystery is how these colossi were carved and raised. Archaeologists still cannot explain exactly what tools the ancient craftsmen used to work with such hard granite. Neither iron saws nor wheeled mechanisms existed then. One of the obelisks, exceeding 30 meters, collapsed during installation and lies in the ground to this day, as if a reminder that even the power of time is not omnipotent. His fall did not destroy the city. On the contrary, it became part of his memory. Axum is not only a place of the dead. This is a living city where history continues in every breath. The Ge'ez language, an ancient dialect that has long disappeared from everyday life but continues to be heard in worship, can still be heard on the streets. Stone churches, built on the foundations of pagan temples, stand next to the ruins of an old palace. Archaeologists call it the Palace of the Queen of Sheba, although there is no historical evidence of her existence. But, like everything in Axum, this does not matter. The legend here is not the opposite of history, but its continuation. When the sun rises over the hills, the shadows from the obelisks fall on the ground like the hands of a clock, dividing not minutes, but millennia. At dawn, they appear silvery. During the day, they appear dazzlingly white, and in the evening they darken, as if returning to the same eternity from which they came. Between them lie ancient tombs carved into the rock. A narrow passage leads down there, and below are the chambers where the kings once rested. The stone lids of the sarcophagi are decorated with carved crosses and symbols of the sun, and seem to have been created not to store bodies, but to hold memories. But the most amazing thing about Axum is the feeling of the presence of time as breathing. It is not frozen, not linear. Here, the past has not gone away. It has simply become part of the landscape. Shepherds drive their flocks past ancient slabs. Women draw water from wells built during the times of the empire, and children play among the ruins, not noticing their antiquity. All this exists simultaneously. Yesterday, today, and tomorrow, merging into a continuous stream. Modern archaeologists consider Axum to be the center of the first African written culture. The stones bear inscriptions carved in Ge'ez and Greek, evidence that this city was a link between continents. Here, roads, cultures, and faiths intersected. Here people first learned to speak with God in the language of architecture. When evening comes and the sun goes down behind the mountains, the light becomes soft and golden. At this hour, the obelisks seem to begin to glow from within, and it seems that this is not a reflection, but an internal fire imprinted in the stone. The wind passes through the valley, and the thin whistle in the cracks resembles a chant. Everything around you freezes, and in this silence you understand. Axum is not just a city, but a monument to the idea of eternity. Here man and stone live in the same time, and this time is endless. Axum was not destroyed. He simply went deep into the eras, leaving only breath on the surface, and if you listen closely, you can hear how wind and stone echo in the night, a dialogue that has been going on for 2,000 years and perhaps will continue as long as the earth stands. On the tiny western Pacific island of Pohnpei, amid mangroves and salty tides, lies what archaeologists call the Venice of the Pacific. But there is only a shadow of truth in this name. Nan Madol is not a city in the usual sense of the word, but a mysterious labyrinth of basalt blocks, built right on the water. More than 90 artificial islands connected by channels form a network where stone and sea live in the same breath. Here, time seems to have dissolved in the tides, and the very idea of the city seems like a dream, woven from legends and salt. The first thing that strikes you about Nan Madol is its scale and impossibility. The blocks from which the walls and platforms are made weigh tens of tons. They have the shape of hexagonal columns, basalts formed from solidified lava, and are folded as if a giant was playing with stone sticks. No one knows how the inhabitants of the tiny island could move such heavy loads. Local legends say that the stones flew through the air, obeying an ancient spell. Scientists offer rational explanations: catamarans, levers, ropes, ramps, but none of them looks convincing if you stand next to these walls and see how perfectly fitted the blocks are stacked into walls several human heights high. The complex occupies several square kilometers. Each platform is an island created on a coral base. The water surrounding Nan Madol is inseparable from its architecture. The canals do not just connect the islands, they act as streets. The walls are reflected in them, and it seems that the city continues down into the water, as if someone built it not for the living, but for spirits. Local residents really believe that the spirits of ancient rulers live here. As the sun sets, they avoid approaching the ruins, believing that the place is guarded by otherworldly forces. According to legend, Nan Madol was the capital of the Saudalair dynasty, rulers who came from the sea. They founded their state long before the era of great discoveries began in Europe. The Saudalairs ruled the islands, collected tribute, and made sacrifices to the gods of the sea and sky. But their power was based not only on fear, but also on secrecy. They said that the rulers had knowledge that allowed them to control the elements. When the last of them fell, the sea took the city. Since then, the tides have become higher, and the waves have gradually flooded the channels, turning Nan Madol into a half-sunken world. Archaeologists date the buildings to around the 1st millennium AD, but the exact date remains controversial. Radiocarbon dating shows that the islands were created over centuries, layer by layer, like a living organism. It was not a city built all at once. It grew like a coral reef, obeying the rhythm of the sea. Perhaps that is why it survived, because it was part of the ecosystem and not an attempt to conquer it. Inside some islets, remains of tombs, sanctuaries, and stone halls have been discovered. The Nan Dawas complex, the supposed burial place of the rulers, attracts particular attention from researchers. Its walls rise above the water, forming a rectangular courtyard within which bones and artifacts are still found. The platform on which Nan Dawa stands is made of basalt columns, laid in layers in a crisscross manner like a giant masonry of black ice. Standing inside, you feel as if you are in the heart of a labyrinth built to hide not the body, but time itself. Today, Nan Madol is immersed in silence. The water slowly rises and falls, reflecting the sky and walls, and it seems that the whole world is breathing in the same rhythm with the tide. When morning comes, the sun breaks through the fog, and the basalt begins to glisten like wet metal. Then the city comes to life for a moment. Clear silhouettes of the walls are visible in the mirrors of the canals, and the illusion is created that it has risen from the depths. But as soon as the sun rises higher, everything disappears again. This alternation of light and water is the magic of Nan Madol, a city that lives not in space, but in time. Modern researchers see Nan Madol as a unique example of naval architecture, created long before the advent of concrete and steel. It embodies the idea of the city as a living being, breathing in the tides. And perhaps that is why this place seems timeless. It belongs neither to the past nor to the present. In the evening, when the sea turns copper-colored and the waves quietly beat against the walls, the city looks like a huge musical instrument. Wind and water create a low hum, like the echo of an ancient ritual. At this moment, Nan Madol does not seem like ruins, but a temple, still fulfilling its function, connecting the living with those who have passed on. If you listen closely, you can catch the quiet splash of water, the distant echo of footsteps, and the elusive rhythm of the tide, the breath of a city that lives on the border of two worlds. And perhaps that is why time does not pass here. It simply returns, like a wave, again and again, covering this stone archipelago of silence. On the west coast of Africa, where the sand meets the ocean, lies one of the most ancient and mysterious places on the planet. the Namib Desert. It is older than the Sahara, older than most mountains, older than the continents themselves in their current form. According to geologists, its age exceeds 80 million years, and therefore every stone here is like a page in the primeval chronicle of the earth. When you look at these dunes, it seems that you are looking into the face of the planet as it was before the advent of man. Everything here is motionless, but in this stillness one can feel the breath of time. The Namib is a landscape shaped by the wind. The dunes, as tall as multi-story buildings, change shape but do not disappear. They move slowly like the waves of a frozen sea, and each vibration is part of a rhythm that lasts millions of years. The sand is painted in all shades of fire, from light gold to thick orange, almost bloody. At sunset, the desert becomes alive, the dunes seem to glow from within, and the boundaries between sky and earth dissolve. This place does not belong to time because it creates it itself. Among the endless sands there are strange circles, perfectly round areas devoid of vegetation. They stretch for hundreds of kilometers and are visible even from space. Scientists call them fairy rings, although this name has more poetry than science. For decades, biologists, geologists, and ecologists have tried to explain their origins. Some talked about termites, others about the competition of roots for moisture, and still others about the breathing of the earth coming out from under the sand. But no theory explained everything. The most amazing thing is their orderliness. These circles are not chaotic. They form patterns, as if someone had placed them manually, according to a principle understandable only to nature itself. For the local Himba and San tribes, these circles are sacred. They call them the traces of the gods or the breath of spirits. It is believed that inside each circle the earth sleeps, and if it is disturbed, one can provoke the wrath of the desert. They bypass them without stepping inside, even if grass grows nearby and animals graze. People here live in harmony with silence, knowing that the desert tolerates, but does not forgive. Despite the harsh climate, the Namib is full of life. Rare species live here that have adapted to the lack of water. The beetles collect morning mist on their shells, directing the droplets to their mouths. Plants absorb moisture directly from the air. Antelopes and jackals go hunting only at night, when the heat subsides. Even the air here is special. It smells of salt and metal, like the breath of the ocean frozen in the sand. On the border between desert and sea lies a place that seems imaginary, the Skeleton Coast. Here the fog spreads over the dunes, and the outlines of the world are lost in its milk. Hundreds of ships that lost their course have crashed on the coastal reefs for centuries, and now their skeletons stick out from the sand like the bones of ancient monsters. Whale bones washed up by storms lie along the shore. Everything here speaks of time, which does not move, but circles. People call this place dead, but on the contrary, it is too alive. It simply lives in a different rhythm, incomprehensible to humans. In the center of the desert, far from the sea, stands Deadvlei, a dried-up salt lake surrounded by dunes 300 meters high. Its white surface is like a mirror in which the shadows of ancient trees are frozen. These dead acacias, blackened by the sun, have been standing here for more than 900 years. Once upon a time, a river flowed in this place, feeding a green valley. Then the current changed and the water disappeared. But the trees did not collapse. Their wood does not rot without moisture. They turned into monuments of time, frozen in eternity. In the sunlight, the shadows of their branches fall on the white ground, forming patterns that look like letters written by nature itself. Travelers who find themselves here at dawn say that it feels like an encounter with something older than death. Everything around is motionless, but energy emanates from this motionlessness, as if the earth itself remembers everything that happened to it. As the sun rises over the dunes, the air begins to shiver and the silence becomes palpable. This silence is not of emptiness, but of presence. the presence of the planet itself, which remembers millions of years without witnesses. Geologists call the Namib life without time. Here processes occur so slowly that a human age seems like an instant. The rocks and sand move like breathing in slow motion. Every grain of sand is the result of the collapse of the mountains that stood here when there were no rivers or trees on the earth. And yet there is tenderness in this eternity. The desert is not hostile. It is simply indifferent. Her beauty does not require a spectator. When night falls, the sky over the Namib becomes pitch black and the stars brighter than anywhere else on Earth. At this moment, you understand that the desert is not dead. It is listening. It stores the sound of the wind, the cry of seagulls over the coast, the roar of the ocean, the echoes of human footsteps. And perhaps if the planet had a heart, it would beat right here, in the silence of the Namib, where millions of years have gathered into one eternal present. In the south of Argentina, in the desert expanses of Patagonia, where the wind cuts the air and the horizon is lost between the mountains and the sky, hides one of the most touching evidence of human presence on Earth, the Cueva de las Manos caves, which means caves of the hands. Here, on the steep walls of the Pinturas River Canyon, human handprints left more than 10,000 years ago are preserved. These are not just drawings. These are voices that have reached out across millennia to say, "We were here." Canon del Rio Pinturas seems like a place out of time. A narrow crevice among the reddish rocks goes deep, and only as you approach the walls you notice that they are alive, covered with hundreds of silhouettes of human hands, printed in ochre, white, black, and purple tones. Some hands belong to adults, others to children. Among them, there are prints with incomplete fingers. Perhaps this was part of a ritual, a symbol of sacrifice or belonging. The entire space of the cave resembles an ancient altar where man first realized his existence. Scientists have determined that the first images at Cueva de las Manos appeared about 11,000 years ago, and the last about 7,000 years after that. That is, over the course of thousands of years, different generations have come here to leave their mark. This makes the place not just a monument of art, but a chronicle of human presence. Archaeologists have found obsidian tools, animal bones, pigment remains, and primitive brushes made from guanaco feathers. Everything suggests that this place was sacred, associated with rituals and possibly initiations. The technique used by ancient artists is striking in its ingenuity. People pressed their palms against the rock and sprayed paint made from a mixture of ochre, minerals, and animal fat through a bone tube. This is how an outline appeared, a negative image of a hand. But nearby, there are also positive prints when the paint was applied directly to the palm. In some places, even traces of brush strokes are visible, as if the artist was in no hurry, working with attention, with that very feeling that makes art immortal. In addition to palms, there are also hunting scenes on the walls. People portrayed guanacos, wild llamas who were pursued with spears and slings. These scenes are not simply decorative. They were probably part of a magical ritual designed to ensure a successful hunt. Among the figures, you can see hunters running, dancing, and sometimes lines that look like maps, perhaps indicating the migration routes of animals. This makes Cueva de las Manos both a gallery and an ancient chronicle. But the most striking thing about these drawings is their humanity. Unlike the paintings in European caves, which depict animals, hunting scenes, and mystical symbols, the main thing here is the hand. Not a god, not a beast, not the sun, but a man. His touch, his desire to leave a mark. Each palm seems to say, "I was, I saw, I felt." And this makes Cueva de las Manos one of the most emotional archaeological sites on the planet. When you stand in this cave, you get a strange feeling of presence. The wind is humming at the entrance. The sun is playing on the walls, and it seems that the people who left these prints are still nearby. They are silent, but their silence is louder than any word. It speaks of the thirst for immortality, of man's desire to overcome time. After all, in essence, this is the first form of art, the first attempt to capture oneself, not with words, but with gesture. Archaeologists call Cueva de las Manos the first museum of humanity, but perhaps it would be more correct to say the first memory. This passage shows that art was born not from the desire to decorate, but from the need to be heard. In this simple act of touching a stone and leaving a mark, the whole drama of human existence is hidden. The fear of disappearing and the desire to be part of something bigger. In the 20th century, the caves were opened to science and became a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Now access there is limited. The paints are too fragile, the walls are too ancient. Tourists can only approach the fence and see the prints. At sunset, when the sun turns the Patagonian rocks blood orange, the caves seem to come to life. The shadows of the hands become brighter, as if flaring up from within. The wind passes through the canyon, and it seems as if ancient voices are returning, telling of a time when man and nature were one. Cueva de las Manos is more than just an archaeological site. This is a symbol of memory frozen in stone. Here a person first told the world, "I am," and this "I" did not disappear. It lives in every print, in every stroke of paint, in every glance directed at the walls. And perhaps it was here, in the heart of Patagonia, that the very idea of art was born. As a way to remain in the world, even when the body leaves and time erases names. The hand caves remind us that everything that makes a person human begins with a simple gesture, extending your palm to the light. Hidden in the mountains of northern Ethiopia, where fog shrouds the peaks and the air is filled with the scent of incense and dust, lies a city that cannot be confused with any other on earth. Lalibela is not just a place of worship, but a stone myth embodied in reality. Here the temples are not erected but carved. They do not stand on the ground, but are born from it, as if the rock itself decided to become a prayer. When you first see them from above, it seems as if it is an illusion. Crosses, domes, arches go deep into the depths and do not rise to the sky. The history of Lalibela begins in the 12th century, during the time of the king whose name the city bears. Legend tells that the young prince Lalibela had a dream. Angels lifted him to heaven and showed him the New Jerusalem, a city shining with the light of faith. When he woke up, he realized that he had to bring this vision to life on earth. He left the court, spent years in solitude, and when he returned, he announced that God had told him to build a sacred city that would become a reflection of the heavenly. Work on Lalibela continued for decades. Stonemasons, monks, and artisans worked day and night, carving temples from solid tuff. Legends say that people worked during the day, and at night they were replaced by angels, and that is why in such a short time it was possible to create 12 churches connected by a network of tunnels and passages. And although archaeologists attribute this to hard work and skill, in every blow of the chisel there is something more than human strength felt. The main temple is Beta Georgis, or Church of St. George. It is carved in the shape of a huge Greek cross, going 10 meters deep into the earth. Its walls are smooth, as if polished by time, and narrow windows let in soft golden light. When you stand at the bottom of this stone well, where the walls rise above your head, you get the feeling that you are inside prayer itself. They don't come here to watch, they come here to be silent. Inside other temples, connected by tunnels, there is twilight. The light from the oil lamps sways on the walls, and it seems that the stone is breathing. The figures of saints are carved directly into the rock. Their faces are barely visible, but this makes them even more alive. In the narrow corridors, you can hear the hum of pilgrims' steps, the whisper of prayers, and the sound of bells. The air is filled with the scent of incense and antiquity. This place does not just keep faith, it itself is faith embodied in matter. Scientists still cannot explain exactly how Lalibela was built. To create one temple, it was necessary to first hollow out a well as deep as a 3-story house, and then cut out walls, vaults, arches, doors, and columns from the inside. All this, without drawings, without metal, without modern tools. Every millimeter had to be precise, otherwise the stone could crack and years of work would be wasted. But not a single church has been destroyed. Not a single arch has collapsed. This is not just skill. It is discipline taken to a sacred act. Lalibela is still alive today. Its temples did not become museums. Masses are still celebrated there, chants are heard, and thousands of pilgrims from all over Ethiopia come here on foot, overcoming mountain paths. They carry crosses, scrolls, water and bread, sleep in the open air, and in the morning go down into the carved passages, where the stone walls greet them with coolness and the echo of ancient singing. At this moment, past and present merge. Here faith is not locked away in books. It flows like a river in the veins of the earth. As the sun sets behind the mountains, Lalibela plunges into golden darkness. The shadows of the temples lengthen, turning into crosses painted on the ground. Local residents say that during these hours, the walls are filled with the breath of angels. You can hear the wind passing through the narrow tunnels, and it seems as if it is the whisper of those who built these sanctuaries. At night, when the stars become especially bright, over the city there is a feeling that the sky reflects the earth, and the earth reflects the sky. This is the very New Jerusalem that Lalibela dreamed of. Archaeologists call Lalibela the Stone Bible, where each temple is a separate chapter. Some are dedicated to saints, others symbolize Bethlehem or Golgotha. Between them are passages that repeat the path of Christ from birth to resurrection. But this is not just symbolism. It is a living ritual that is performed daily for centuries. In the 20th century, the city was included in the UNESCO World Heritage List, but for local residents it has always been above any titles. This is not a monument. This is a heart. When pilgrims leave Lalibela, they take with them not a memory, but a feeling, as if they had touched a stone in which a prayer still sounds. Standing on the edge of one of the temples, you can see how the morning fog rises from the valley, hiding houses and roads. Only the tops of the crosses remain visible above the gray sea of clouds. At this moment, it seems that the city really floats between the worlds, earthly and heavenly. Lalibela does not age because she was created not for time but for eternity. In the southwest of Bolivia, at an altitude of more than 3,500 meters above sea level, lies a place where the earth and sky cease to be distinguished. The Uyuni Salt Flat is the largest salt plateau on the planet, an expanse that seems endless. Its surface is so smooth that engineers use it to calibrate satellites, and travelers lose their sense of reality when walking on it. Everything here is white, not from snow but from salt, shining under the sun, as if the earth itself had become a mirror of light. When you stand on the edge of Uyuni, it is difficult to believe that this is not an illusion. On a clear day, the horizon disappears, and step by step, you seem to be moving not forward, but towards the light. The salt crunches under your feet, the air is dry and cold, and the sky is reflected in the ground so that you lose the sense of where you are, on the ground or in the clouds. When a thin layer of water forms on the surface after rain, Uyuni turns into the largest mirror in the world. Mountains, clouds, the sun, even the stars at night are reflected with such precision as if the planet had doubled itself for an instant. But this place is not just a natural illusion. It contains the memory of an ancient sea that disappeared millions of years ago. Scientists believe that Uyuni is a remnant of the huge prehistoric Lake Minchin, which once covered almost all of southwestern Bolivia. When the waters evaporated, what was left was crystallized salt, a white field stretching beyond the horizon. The depth of the salt layer reaches several meters, and underneath it lie deposits of lithium, a metal that today powers the energy of the modern world. In this contrast is the symbol of Uyuni, a place where antiquity and the future unite under one sky. Salt here is not just a substance, it breathes. In the heat of the day, its surface cracks, forming hexagonal patterns like a huge network covering the ground. These lines are created by the process of evaporation. Water, rising from the depths, crystallizes on the surface, leaving ideal geometric shapes. In each of these patterns, you can see the structure of time, ordered but alive, like the breath of the planet. In the midst of this white ocean rises the island of Incahuasi, a patch of ancient volcanic rock covered with giant cacti. Some of them reach 10 meters and are older than many civilizations. From the top of the island, a panorama opens up that makes your head spin. The whiteness stretches to the very horizon, and somewhere in the distance the sky seems to merge with the earth. The silence here is absolute. No echo, no wind, only the sounds of your own breathing and the dull beat of your heart. But in this silence there is a special grandeur. The salt marsh doesn't seem dead. On the contrary, it lives its own rhythm. In the morning it is dazzlingly white, during the day it is silvery, and in the evening it turns pink under the fading sun. And at night it turns into bottomless blackness, where the stars are reflected in the ground, and it seems that you are standing in the center of the universe. Even for scientists accustomed to facts and figures, Uyuni remains a place where knowledge gives way to contemplation. For the local Aymara and Quechua peoples, this space is sacred. They believe that the goddess Tunaupa, the embodiment of mountains and winds, once lived here. Her tears after the loss of her child turned into salt lakes, and she herself turned to stone, becoming one of the surrounding mountains. Therefore, the salt mined by the inhabitants of the surrounding villages is considered not just a resource, but a gift from the goddess. People carefully collect crystals by hand, put them in pyramids, which slowly dry out under the sun, and each of them seems like a small altar. In the mid-20th century, Uyuni became a symbol of isolation. No cities were built here, no roads passed through. But with the development of technology, this white space found itself at the intersection of the ancient world and modern energy. Beneath the layers of salt are colossal reserves of lithium, the element that powers batteries and the digital age. Scientists say that Uyuni contains almost half of the world's reserves. The irony is that the place where time seemed to stand still has now become the source of energy for the future. However, for travelers and local residents, Uyuni remains first and foremost a sacred mirror. During the rainy season, when water covers the surface, sky and earth become one. Tourists walk on the water, reflecting their silhouettes, and seem to be floating in the air. There is no horizon, no distance, no usual gravity of perception. Everything dissolves in light. Even the shadow loses its shape, and a person turns into a part of infinite space. This moment of unity with the planet cannot be described. It can only be felt. When the sun sets, the salt marsh turns pink and gold, and the shadows of the mountains slowly creep across it. The wind brings the smell of salt and cold, and at this moment it seems that time has truly stopped. There is no history here because history is too small for such a place. There is only eternity, calm, transparent, silent. Scientists say the salt marsh continues to change, albeit almost imperceptibly. Moisture coming from underground sources raises new crystals, and the landscape is renewed every year. Uyuni seems to be breathing, exhaling water, inhaling light. He lives in a cycle with no beginning or end. And yet in this white silence one feels not emptiness, but presence. The presence of the planet itself, its ancient memory. When you stand among this mirror, where stars and clouds are reflected, it is impossible to separate yourself from the world. You are part of this light, part of the breath, part of the eternal reflection. The Uyuni salt flat is not just a natural phenomenon. This is a mirror in which the earth sees itself, and perhaps it is here that a person can for the first time feel what it means to be not an observer, but part of an endless world where everything is interconnected. Salt, light, sky, and silence. High in the Andes, among the clouds and eternal fogs of northern Peru, where the green slopes of the mountains fall into the abyss, there is a place about which neither chronicles nor maps have known for a long time. Citadel Cuelap is an ancient stone city of the Chachapoya people, warriors of the clouds, which existed long before the arrival of the Incas and disappeared, leaving behind a trace as majestic as it is mysterious. Here the air is saturated with moisture, and every stone wall, overgrown with moss and lichen, breathes time. When you climb the narrow path to its gates, it seems that you are entering not into ruins, but into the memory of the land itself. For a long time, only local residents knew about Cuelap. To the outside world, it was a discovery of the 19th century, when the first explorers made their way through the jungle and saw huge walls built right on the ridge of the mountain. They rise 20 meters and stretch for more than half a kilometer, forming a ring inside of which life once boiled. Everything that has survived seems impossible. Thousands of tons of stone were laid without cement, with such precision that not even a blade could fit between the blocks. Scientists are still arguing about the purpose of this place. Some call it a fortress, others call it a sacred city, an observatory, or even a place of transition between worlds. But, as with many great mysteries of antiquity, the truth probably involves everything at once. Cuelap was built not only for protection, but also for contemplation. Its location is amazing. From the top, there is a view of the Utcubamba Valley, where the morning fog spreads like the sea and the mountains rise from the clouds like islands in the sky. At such moments, you understand that the city was not facing the earth. It was facing the sky. Archaeological finds show that thousands of people lived here. Stone houses, built in circles, stand in rows along narrow streets. Inside the walls, canals, drainage systems, warehouses, and altars have been preserved. Many dwellings are decorated with reliefs: snakes, birds, rhombuses, spirals. These symbols are repeated in other Chachapoya sanctuaries and, apparently, reflect their ideas about the world. A snake, the underworld, a bird, the sky, a rhombus, eternity. But perhaps the most surprising thing is the gate. A narrow passage that tapers towards the top like the neck of an hourglass. It is built so that only one can pass through it at a time, and any enemy trying to break in would be forced to walk slowly, with the defenders at gunpoint from above. However, the defensive function is only part of the truth. In certain light, day and night meet in this passage precisely at the moment of the equinox. Perhaps the gate symbolized not just an entrance, but a transition from the world of the living to the world of spirits. The Chachapoyas were a mysterious people. The Spaniards who first encountered them in the 16th century described them as fair-skinned, slender, and tall people, different from other Andean peoples. They lived in the mountains, built fortresses, revered the sun and clouds, and believed that the souls of the dead turned into fog falling onto the valleys. Their culture almost disappeared after the conquest, but its memory was preserved in legends. It is said that the spirits of Cuelap's builders still guard the city, and when the fog is particularly thick, their footsteps can be heard on the stone. Excavations begun in the late 20th century revealed underground tombs and bones of people buried in a sitting position facing east. Next to them were found ceramics, fabrics, and stone figurines, everything that was supposed to accompany them in another world. There are traces of red ochre on the walls of some rooms, as if rituals related to life and death were performed here. In one of the temples, archaeologists discovered a round depression in the center of which was a perfectly polished stone, possibly an ancient astronomical instrument. After all, the Chachapoya people lived in accordance with the rhythm of the sky. Their holidays coincided with the phases of the moon, and the harvest depended on the position of the sun. Today, Cuelap is often called the second Machu Picchu, but this comparison is unfair. It doesn't look like an Incan imperial citadel. If Machu Picchu is facing the sun and grandeur, then Cuelap is facing silence and clouds. There is no solemnity here. There is peace. Even the ruins seem not destroyed, but asleep. When the fog descends, the walls dissolve and the city becomes a ghost. And when the clouds part, the stones flash with light again, as if awakening. Archaeologists say that Cuelap was built around the 6th century AD and lasted for about 1,000 years. Then they left him. Why is unknown. Perhaps due to disease, climate change, or invasion by neighboring tribes. But like many sacred places, it did not die, but simply passed into another state. From a city of the living, it became a city of memory. Today, a cable car leads to Cuelap, but even it does not disturb the feeling of antiquity. Tourists standing at the top experience what the ancients must have felt: awe at the silence. No sounds come from the valley, only the sound of the wind and the cries of condors. When the sun breaks through the clouds, spots of light play on the walls, and the city seems to come to life. Guides say that in the evenings the fog in the valley begins to rise, enveloping the ruins. First the paths disappear, then the houses, then the walls. And when only a gray haze remains, Cuelap becomes what it may always have been: a temple of clouds. People leave the top, but below in the darkness, reflections of light on the wet stone are still visible for a long time, like the eyes of those who built this city. Cuelap is a reminder that civilizations do not disappear. They simply change shape, like clouds that spread over the mountains today and turn into rain tomorrow. There is no end to this cycle. There is only the breath of eternity, frozen in stone. And if you stand for a long time at the gates of Cuelap, listening to the wind, you can hear something that cannot be expressed in words: the whisper of a stone in which the echo of thousands of years sounds. On the western bank of the Nile, opposite ancient Thebes, among the dry rocks where the air smells of sun and stone, lies the Valley of the Kings, the place where the Egyptian pharaohs found eternal refuge. There are no luxurious pyramids, no majestic columns. Everything is hidden underground. Only cracks in the limestone and narrow paths between the hills betray the presence of one of the most mysterious necropolises in the world. In these mountains, which the Egyptians called the Western Kingdom, time not only stopped, it became the material from which the walls of the tombs were built. After the era of the pyramids, when the grandiose tombs of Giza and Saqqara became easy prey for robbers, the pharaohs of the new kingdom decided to hide their tombs. Their new idea was not about height, but about depth. They abandoned magnificent forms in order to hide eternity under a layer of rocks. This is how the Valley of the Kings arose, the invisible city of the dead, carved into the heart of the mountain. The first person to choose this burial place was Thutmose I, the pharaoh of the 18th dynasty, who reigned more than 3,400 years ago. His architect Ineni wrote, "I built his tomb in a secret place. No one saw, no one heard." Since then, more and more new corridors, staircases, and halls began to be cut out in the valley. Each pharaoh wanted to create not just a tomb, but a reflection of his destiny in stone. The Valley of the Kings resembles an underground labyrinth. More than 60 tombs are hidden in the depths of the hills, and each one has a special story. Some have barely begun, short, unfinished, like the lives of their owners. Others go hundreds of meters deep, where the walls are painted with scenes from the Book of the Dead and Amduat, ancient Egyptian texts telling the path of the soul through the afterlife. The light of the torches, reflected from the polished paintings, creates the illusion of movement. The sun floats across the sky, passes through the gates of the night, and is born again. The most famous tomb of the valley of the young pharaoh Tutankhamun was discovered almost untouched in 1922 by British archaeologist Howard Carter after many years of searching. When he first looked inside, the torch illuminated with a golden glow, and Carter uttered the words that became legend. "I see miracles." Before him lay statues, chariots, sarcophagi, amulets, a whole world frozen in anticipation of eternity. In the center is a sarcophagus with the mummy of a pharaoh whose face was hidden by a golden mask which became a symbol of ancient Egypt. But behind the beauty of these finds lies something else, an understanding of how much the Egyptians believed in immortality. For them, death was not the end, but a transition. The tomb is not a place of rest, but a ship ready to sail on the river of time. Every symbol, every star on the ceiling, every sign on the sarcophagus had a meaning. These drawings contain encrypted formulas so that the soul does not get lost in the night and finds its way to the light of Ra. Modern technologies are revealing new secrets of the valley. In recent years, laser scanning and thermography have revealed voids in the walls, possibly hidden chambers not yet explored. Some archaeologists believe that behind the wall of Tutankhamun's tomb there may be another room, probably the burial of Nefertiti. But the Egyptian authorities are in no hurry to excavate, as if wanting to maintain a secret. After all, the valley does not tolerate haste. Everything here is subordinated not to human curiosity, but to the rhythm of eternity. The landscape around seems lifeless, but it is full of symbols. The main peak of Mount Alcorn, rising above the valley, has the shape of a natural pyramid, as if nature itself had created its own monument here. For the Egyptians, this was a sign. The divine mountain leading to the sun sanctifies the path of the pharaohs. At the foot of this mountain, in the rocks, their tombs are hidden, and every sunrise fills them with light, as if a reminder that life and death are inextricably linked. When you enter one of the tombs, the air becomes dense, as if centuries were pressing with their weight. The walls are covered with images of the gods: Osiris, Isis, Anubis, Mot. They meet the soul of Pharaoh, measure its heart, weigh it on the scales of truth. In the depths of the tomb, it is not darkness that reigns, but a golden twilight, like an eternal sunset. Here, everything is subject to the cycle of rebirth. Death is just night, after which dawn comes again. From the outside, the valley appears silent. During the day, there is only wind, carrying dust and the smell of hot stone. But at night, everything changes. The moon paints the rocks silver, and they look like the walls of an ancient temple. Sometimes it seems as if you can hear footsteps or quiet breathing in the distance. Not the sounds of the living, but the memory of those who have passed on. After all, the valley still lives its own life. The sand shifts, revealing new passages. The clay crumbles, revealing traces of time. Archaeologists working here say the sense of time in the valley is different. The minutes stretch like grains of sand between your fingers. Even modern devices, sensors, cameras, spotlights, are not able to destroy this feeling of sacred silence. Here, the past and present exist simultaneously. You stand among the stone carved 3,000 years ago, and you feel that there is no distance between you and those who built these vaults. But perhaps the most striking feature of the Valley of the Kings is that, despite everything, it remains a mystery. Not a single one of its inhabitants was forgotten. Their names are carved into the walls. Their souls, as the Egyptians believed, continue to exist in the rays of the sun. And every dawn over the Theban mountains is not just the beginning of a new day, but the rebirth of all who rest here. When the last ray of sun disappears behind the slope, the valley plunges into darkness. Only the stars are reflected on the white walls and seem to be lamps in the underworld. At this moment, it becomes clear. The Valley of the Kings is not just a burial place. This is a book written in stone, where every line is a prayer to eternity. And if you listen, you can hear a quiet whisper coming from the depths of the mountain, like the breath of the wind. These may be the voices of the pharaohs, still speaking to their gods. Indeed, in Egypt, even death has no end. It is just a new form of life carved into the rock. In the north of Siberia, beyond the Arctic Circle, where the land knows almost no roads and summer lasts only a few weeks, lies one of the most mysterious places in Russia, the Putorana Plateau. This is a silent stone world, where there are no cities, where mountains fall into the abyss of lakes, and the sky seems closer than the earth itself. Here, nature not only exists, it reigns as a force that recognizes neither time nor man. The Putorana Plateau is called the Land of Waterfalls and the Heart of Siberia, but none of these names can convey its real essence. This place is not like the world we are used to. It seems to be carved out of another era, where time has not yet learned to flow. Putorana is one of the oldest plateaus on the planet, formed more than 250 million years ago, when the Earth opened up and lava erupted from its depths, covering thousands of kilometers. Having cooled, it turned into a stepped labyrinth, thousands of cliffs, canyons, and rivers cascading into deep valleys. According to geologists, every stone here is a witness to a catastrophe that happened long before the appearance of man. Then, at the turn of the Permian period, eruptions in these places changed the climate of the entire planet and caused mass extinction. The Putorana Plateau is not just a landscape, but a living chronicle of the Earth. Despite its severity, this region amazes with its richness of shapes and colors. In the summer, when the sun does not set beyond the horizon, the rocks are painted in shades of copper and purple, and the numerous lakes shine like mirrors, reflecting the cold northern sky. The largest of them is Lake Lama, which stretches for hundreds of kilometers among the mountains. Its water is so clear that the bottom is visible even at a depth of tens of meters. There is not the slightest trace of civilization here, only the reflection of clouds, the cries of seagulls, and the rustle of the wind passing through the cedars. But the real soul of Putorana is the waterfalls. There are thousands of them, and each of them is unique in its own way. The most famous is the Talnikovsky waterfall, one of the highest in Eurasia. He falls off a cliff almost 700 meters high and falls into the abyss, disappearing in a cloud of steam. It is impossible to see it entirely. You can only hear how the roar of water spreads for kilometers, merging with the noise of the wind and the echo of the rocks. There is something primordial in this sound, as if the earth itself speaks in a language that man no longer understands. Travelers who have been here say that Putorana gives the feeling of another planet. Everything around seems motionless, but in this stillness one feels movement, slow, invisible, fluid. Water wears away the stone, mosses and lichens cover the basalt, and ice slides into the valleys. There is no city noise or traces of a human hand, and therefore every sound takes on meaning. A drop falling into a lake becomes an event, and a breath of wind becomes a reminder of the presence of the invisible. For a long time, this place was almost inaccessible. Only in the mid-20th century did geologists and photographers begin to get here. But even today, the plateau remains one of the most inaccessible regions of the planet. You can only get there by helicopter or by boat, and the journey takes days. But those who got there say that Putorana is not just a landscape, but a test. Here, a person feels not like a master, but a guest who has come to a temple where everything is subject to the laws of ancient harmony. The Putorana Plateau is included in the UNESCO World Heritage List, not only because of its beauty, but also because of its unique ecosystem. Here you can find Arctic and Siberian animal species that are found nowhere else. Bighorn sheep, reindeer, wolverines, snowy owls, all coexist in a delicate balance. Scientists call this region a bridge between tundra and taiga, a world on the border of two elements. But among all this natural power, there is something elusive, a feeling of sacredness. Local peoples, Evenks and Nenets, from ancient times considered Putarana the land of spirits. They said that the mountains here are alive, and the waterfalls are their voices. Each cliff had its own name, each lake its own character. People brought offerings and left stones and pieces of cloth near the water, asking for protection or advice. Even today, those who travel to these parts often take an amulet with them, not as a superstition, but as a sign of respect for a land where a person is but a moment. Putarana holds many mysteries. Scientists have found in these places traces of ancient sites dating back thousands of years BC. Who lived here, in this kingdom of cold and stone, remains a mystery. Perhaps nomadic hunters, perhaps shamans, who came to seek silence. But it seems that people always returned here not for the sake of loot, but for the sake of a feeling that is difficult to explain in words. Here, everything seems closer to eternity. When winter comes, the plateau turns into an icy kingdom. The temperature drops below 50 degrees and the sun barely rises above the horizon. But even then, life does not stop. The snow sparkles like tiny shards of light, and the northern lights light up the sky with ribbons of green and purple. This light falls on the mountains, and it seems that the rocks themselves glow from the inside. At such moments, the boundaries between heaven and earth disappear. Only a cold, clear radiance remains, in which the breath of the planet is felt. Geologists say that Putarana contains one of the most complete geological records on Earth. In the layers of basalt, you can read a history that begins with the birth of continents. Here you can see the lines where oceans passed millions of years ago, where plates collided, where lava froze to form steppes. This is not just a place, it is a book written in stone, where each page weighs thousands of tons. But for those who have ever stood on the edge of Putarana, this book sounds differently, like a prayer. Because here, among the mountains and lakes, a person sees the world as it was before him, without noise, without roads, without traces. And in this pristine silence, for the first time, he understands what it means to be truly present. When the sun goes down behind the mountains, the water in the lakes becomes still, and it seems that the whole world is holding its breath. At this moment, the plateau turns into a mirror where the sky is reflected, and you stand in the middle of eternity, where there is no time, no history, only endless peace. Putarana is not just a landscape. This is a reminder that the earth was and will be without us. And if you listen, you can hear how in the depths of the stone, the echo of that ancient explosion with which life began still sounds. In the southeast of Iceland, where volcanoes meet eternal ice, lies a place that cannot be described in ordinary words. Vatnajökull is a giant glacier that covers more than 80% of the country. Beneath its surface lie volcanic valleys, black deserts, icy rivers and caves that seem to have been created not by nature, but by sleep. This is a world where fire and ice have entered into an ancient alliance, where time flows not forward, but inward, into the thickness of blue crystalline silence. From above, Vatnajökull resembles a white sea frozen in movement. Its surface is cut with cracks tens of meters wide, and underneath them is an entire underground world. There, in the depths of the ice, caves are born, shining in all shades of blue, from soft blue to dark sapphire. They appear and disappear every year. With the arrival of winter, the glacier inhales cold, becomes denser, and in the summer exhales heat, creating new passages and halls. No cave here lasts forever. What you see today may disappear tomorrow, turning into a stream of water or a silent sinkhole. When you go down inside one of the caves, the first thing that strikes you is the light. It doesn't just reflect off the walls, it seems to come from the ice itself. There are no lamps in the depths, but the space glows with a soft, unreal glow, as if a frozen flame is burning inside. The blue vaults above your head resemble the ceiling of a cathedral, and a thin stream flows under your feet, carrying meltwater formed over thousands of years. The steps echo dully, and this echo sounds not like a sound, but like the breath of the planet itself. Vatnajökull's ice is older than most mountains. Some layers contain air that is more than 800,000 years old. Scientists say that by studying these bubbles, you can hear the climate of the Earth during the time of the Neanderthals, the concentration of carbon dioxide, temperature, even traces of volcanic dust. Thus, a glacier is not just a mass of frozen water. This is a repository of memory, a library of the planet, where every crack is a line, every block is a chapter. But this storage is alive. Dozens of volcanoes sleep under Vatnajökull. The most famous is Grímsvötn, which erupts every few decades, sending columns of steam and lava directly under the ice. When this happens, the ice melts, creating giant subglacial rivers. Sometimes they break through. Such floods are called Jökulhlaup here. In a matter of hours, water can sweep away everything in its path. Roads, bridges, entire valleys. These disasters occur regularly, and therefore Vatnajökull is a symbol of the dual power of nature. It preserves and destroys, gives life and takes it away. However, there is a special harmony in this danger. Icelanders live next to the Millennium Glacier and are not afraid of it. They call him the ancient dragon who sleeps but does not take revenge. In their legends, Vatnajökull is the keeper of the balance between the elements. They say that under its thickness lives a spirit that connects water and fire so that the world does not fall apart. And indeed, only here, at one point on the Earth, can you see how a volcano breathes under the ice and transparent rivers are born on the surface carrying the warmth of life. Inside ice caves, the sense of time disappears. Everything around is motionless, but in this stillness, one can feel movement, not human, but geological. The ice flows slowly, sliding along the rock base, compressing and expanding under pressure. If you put your hand to the wall, you can feel a faint vibration, as if a living heart is beating somewhere in the depths. Sometimes the ice cracks, producing a deep, booming sound similar to an organ note. These sounds are the music of the Earth, slow and endless. Scientists are studying the Vatnajökull caves to understand how the climate is changing. Every year they return with instruments, photographs, and samples. But when you look at these landscapes, it becomes clear. No data can convey what a person feels when he finds himself here. Ice is like a mirror, which reflects not only light, but also presence. It's like he's looking back at you. With the onset of winter, when the temperature drops below 20 degrees, the caves become fragile, like glass. There is perfect silence inside, not a sound of wind, not a drop of water, just a crackling sound reminiscent of breathing. Sometimes at this moment you can see a phenomenon that the locals call the dance of light. A ray of sun, breaking through a tiny crack in the arch, is reflected in the ice, and the entire cave is momentarily illuminated with blue flame. It only lasts a few seconds, but those seconds seem like an eternity. When you go outside, the world seems different. It takes a long time for the eyes to get used to normal light, and the whiteness of the snow no longer seems simple. It is filled with depth, knowledge, and the weight of centuries. In the distance, you can see mountains whose peaks are shrouded in steam. This is the breath of volcanoes breaking through the ice. Everything around reminds us of the eternal circle of destruction and rebirth. Vatnajökull is the place where the Earth shows its pulse. Here you can literally observe how the planet breathes. Ice moves, water is born, fire waits in the wings. All this is one continuous process in which man is only a witness. As night falls, the Icelandic sky lights up with the northern lights. Green and purple stripes of light reflect on the icy walls, turning the caves into endless halls of mirrors. It seems as if you are standing within the light itself, surrounded by shimmering silence. And somewhere in this silence, you can hear a dull, slow beat, the pulse of the ancient world, not subject to time. Local guides say, those who go down into the ice caves and hear the ice crack will never remain the same, because this is not just a natural spectacle. It is a meeting with the very essence of the planet, with its cold breath and endless patience. The caves of Vatnajökull are not a place of fear or cold. This is a place of clarity. Here, everything unnecessary disappears. Thoughts, noise, words. All that remains is light, ice, and the feeling that you are standing on the border between time and eternity. And when you leave, the snow creaks under your feet again, and the entrance to the icy heart of the earth slowly closes behind you. It seems that the world has become more transparent, and you along with it. On the eastern outskirts of Russia, where the earth still remembers the breath of the primordial world, the Valley of Geysers is hidden, one of the most amazing places on the planet. It hides in the heart of Kamchatka, in the depths of the Kronotsky Nature Reserve, and you can only get there by air. Through clouds of fog, over the ridges of volcanoes, over valleys from which steam rises. When the helicopter descends lower and the landscape opens up beneath you, it seems that you are seeing the earth at the moment of its birth, boiling, breathing, thundering with life. The Valley of Geysers is a rare phenomenon that exists in only a few places in the world, but nowhere is it as grandiose as here. On a site just 6 kilometers long, there are more than 500 thermal springs and dozens of active geysers, throwing out columns of boiling water to a height of up to 40 meters. They breathe at different times with different strength, but they are all subject to the same rhythm, the breathing of the planet. The first scientific discovery of the valley took place relatively recently, in 1941, when hydrologist Tatyana Ustinova and guide Anisifor Krupanin stumbled upon clouds of steam rising from the gorge. Having gone down there, they saw an incredible sight. The earth was boiling, the air was trembling with heat, and geysers erupted one after another, creating a phantasmagoric landscape. Since then, this place has become one of the most inaccessible natural wonders of Russia. The landscape of the valley cannot be described in simple words. Slopes covered with moss and lichen turn into fields of bubbling springs, and below the Geysernaya River carries hot steam along its banks. The water here is of different colors: emerald, blue, muddy yellow, orange, depending on the mineral content. Steam rises from the ground in thick clouds, and every step along the path is accompanied by hissing, gurgling, and the sound of bubbles beneath the surface. Everything lives, everything moves, everything sounds. But the valley is not just beautiful. It is literally alive. This is a laboratory of nature, where you can observe how elements are born, how new forms of the earth are created. Water, passing through magmatic layers, is saturated with silicon, sulfur, iron, and returns to the surface, creating unique deposits that change the landscape year after year. The rocks here grow, disappear, crumble. Everything is subject to an eternal cycle of renewal. Scientists call this place a portal of geological processes. Here you can see how the heat mechanism works inside the planet. Each geyser has its own system of channels in which water under pressure is heated to the boiling point and breaks out. Some of them erupt once an hour, others once a day, and the most powerful, the giant, erupts up to 40 meters high every few hours. When it awakens, the earth trembles, the air is filled with hissing and thunder, and it seems as if the volcano itself has spoken. But the valley contains not only beauty, and tragedy too. In 2007, a powerful landslide moved huge masses of earth and partially blocked the bed of the Geysernaya River. Several geysers disappeared underwater forever. Many then thought that the valley was lost. But nature, as always, showed the will to revive. Within a few years, fresh springs appeared in new areas, and the valley came to life again. It changed, but did not disappear, as if it reminded people that here power belongs only to the elements. For Kamchatka, the valley is a symbol of pristineness. Here, a few kilometers away, you can see all the elements: fire, water, steam, earth, air, connected into a single living system. Geysers erupt next to glaciers, warm springs flow through the snow, and birches, mosses, and rosemary grow on the slopes around. Above all this, circling eagles and brown bears, accustomed to the warmth of the earth. This is one of the few places on the planet where wildlife remains completely independent of humans. Scientists and travelers who have been here say that the valley creates a feeling of being on the border of worlds. Everything seems familiar, but alien, earthly, and extraterrestrial at the same time. The hiss of steam is like breathing. The flashes of geysers resemble heartbeats, and the constant movement of water and steam gives you the feeling that the planet itself is talking to you in its own language. Local residents, Itelmens and Koryaks, have considered these lands sacred since ancient times. They said that the spirits of fire live here, and the geysers are their breath. Each source had its own name and its own character. One was hot-tempered, another was calm, the third was unpredictable. Even today, scientists retain these ancient names, as if recognizing that rational explanation does not negate respect for ancient power. The Valley of Geysers is a living reminder of the youth of the Earth. It does not age because each eruption makes it new. Here, time does not move linearly. It rotates, returns, flashes, and disappears, like steam above a source. And when you stand on a wooden platform surrounded by clouds of sulfur and steam, you feel that the person here is not the owner, but a witness. Sometimes the valley falls asleep in thick fog. Then you can only hear the breathing of the earth, quiet, even, like a dream. But as soon as a ray of sun breaks through the clouds, the whole valley flashes with gold. The geysers come to life one after another, and it seems that the planet itself is celebrating its awakening. The Kamchatka Valley of Geysers is not just a natural wonder. This is the heart of the planet, open to the world. Here you can see how the earth breathes, how light is born, how harmony emerges from chaos. This is a place where the elements do not fight, but coexist, reminding us that destruction is just another form of creation. And when the last geyser subsides and steam rises above the valley again, you are left with the feeling that you were present at a conversation between the earth and itself. Ancient, endless, incomprehensible. On the eastern edge of California, at the foot of the Sierra Nevada, lies a place where the landscape seems to have been torn from another planet. Mono Lake is one of the oldest on Earth. It has existed for more than 700,000 years, having survived the change of glaciers, volcanic eruptions, and the appearance of the first people in America. There are no fish, no plants, or even fresh moisture in its waters. Everything here is saturated with salt, sulfur, and alkali, and the shores are covered with white growths, rock formations that look like ancient bones sticking out of the ground. But it is precisely in this lifelessness that amazing beauty is hidden, the beauty of the beginning of the world. Mono Lake is located in a landlocked basin. Not a single river flows out from here. All the water brought by streams and rains remains inside, evaporating under the sun and leaving behind salt. Over millennia, this turned the lake into a chemical reservoir, saturated with carbonates, boron, sulfur, and sodium. Its alkalinity is tens of times higher than seawater, and the density of the water is such that it seems to repel any living creature. If you lower your hand, it glides across the surface as if through thick butter. But contrary to expectations, Mono is not dead. In this harsh kingdom, there was its own circle of life. The water is home to millions of microscopic algae and Artemia shrimp, which in turn attract clouds of birds. In summer, the lake turns into a huge migration hub. Seagulls, waders, and flamingos fly here. Their cries echo over the gray shores, creating the feeling that the desert itself is coming to life. In these sounds, you can hear the breath of the primordial world, where life and salt are one and the same. But the most amazing thing is the tough towers that rise from the water and along the shores. They look like frozen sculptures, as if they were carved by the hands of ancient gods. In fact, these are natural formations. Thousands of years ago, underground springs, rich in calcium, made their way through the bottom of the lake and met its salty water, saturated with carbon dioxide. Upon contact, limestone was formed, tough. This is how these towers, columns, and spears grew, looking like ruined cities. When the water level dropped, they were exposed, turning into a stone symphony in which time sounds like the music of the wind. Morning on the banks of the Mono is a timeless spectacle. Воздух холоден, и над водой клубится легкий пар. In the rays of the rising sun, the tough towers light up with gold, reflected in the mirror surface, and it seems that everything around is frozen between dreams and reality. All you can hear is the splashing of waves and the distant cries of birds. In the evening, the lake becomes almost black. Its surface absorbs light, like a mirror looking into the sky. When night falls, the water reflects the stars, and there is a strange feeling as if you are standing not at the lake, but at the edge of the universe. Scientists have long been interested in Mono. It is a natural archive. Its sediments contain traces of climate change over hundreds of thousands of years. Layers of ash tell stories of ancient volcanic eruptions. Dust tells of periods of drought, and the chemical composition of water reflects the breathing of the earth. Geologists call it the chronicle of planetary catastrophes. But oddly enough, even the driest data cannot convey how alive this place seems. It does not have the usual greenery, but there is the breath of the wind, the movement of light, the endless reflection of the sky. The history of the lake is a story of survival. In the 20th century, Mono almost died. The waters of the rivers that feed it were diverted towards Los Angeles to supply the metropolis. The lake level began to fall, salinity increased several times, and the ecosystem was on the verge of collapse. The birds disappeared, the shores dried up, and the tough towers were exposed like bones. Then scientists and local residents raised the alarm. A long struggle began to save the ancient lake. In the 90s, water intake was reduced and Mono gradually came to life. Its level is still far from what it used to be, but life has returned, as if nature itself had not allowed itself to disappear. Locals and travelers call the lake the place where the sky falls to the ground. Indeed, it is difficult to say where the air ends and the water begins. Everything is reflected. Clouds, mountains, the sun, even sounds seem to echo. Here, every moment feels like eternity. The landscape of Mono captivates with its silence, not dead, but deep, like breathing. In this silence, one can hear the presence of the ancient world, which still lives in its own rhythm. Sometimes a strong wind raises waves, and then the surface of the lake turns into a living mirror in which the sky is reflected, but with distortion, as if time itself is trembling. These vibrations are fascinating. They remind you that even the most motionless things on Earth move, just too slowly for the human eye. Among the landscapes of America, there is no other place that conveys so strongly the feeling of antiquity. Здесь не нужно искать руины. Сама природа стала храмом. Mono is the embodiment of the memory of the earth, its breathing, its look inside itself. When you stand on its shore, it seems that you are not seeing the present, but a reflection of the eras when the world was just beginning, when water and stone first found balance. And maybe that's why Mono Lake is so attractive to artists, photographers, and wanderers. It seems to attract those who are looking for answers to the question of what time means. After all, here the past has not gone away. It simply became part of the landscape, dissolved in the air, in the glare of the sun, in the salt sculptures, in the sounds of the wind. As the sun goes down and the purple sunset flashes over the mountains, the lake lights up with a soft inner light. The silence becomes almost tangible, and you feel how everything around is breathing: stones, water, sky. Mono reminds us that the world is alive even where there seems to be nothing. It speaks not in words but in reflection, not in sound, but in light. And looking at this ancient mirror, you can suddenly understand a simple truth. Everything passes, but nothing disappears. Everything leaves a trace, like a handprint in a cave, like the roar of a geyser in the mountains, like quiet ripples on water reflecting eternity. On the roof of the world, among the winds carrying the smell of eternity, Mount Kailash rises, one of the most mysterious peaks of the planet. She stands in western Tibet, in the remote region of Nari, where the air is so thin that every breath feels like touching another dimension. Kailash is not just a mountain. For millions of people on Earth, Hindus, Buddhists, Jains, and Bons, it is the axis mundi, the sacred point around which existence itself revolves. And yet it remains one of the least explored peaks on the planet. No one has ever climbed its peak. When you look at Kailash from afar, it looks like a perfect pyramid. Its top has a surprisingly regular shape, 4 almost perfectly symmetrical faces oriented to the cardinal points. In certain lighting, it appears as if smooth horizontal lines run along the slopes, as if someone had carved steps leading to the sky. Even for geologists, this form remains a mystery. They explain it by ancient tectonic processes, but the human mind still looks for a trace of design in these lines. The height of Kailash is only 6,638 meters, less than the neighboring 8,000ers. But the sacredness of this mountain makes it the center of not only physical, but also spiritual geography. According to Hindu texts, at the top of Kailash lives the god Shiva, the lord of destruction and renewal, sitting in eternal meditation. For Buddhists, it is the seat of the Sambhogakaya, the manifested state of enlightenment. In Jainism, the mountain is considered the place where the first of the prophets achieved liberation, and in the ancient Tibetan religion, Bon, the place where the Lord of the Mountains and Winds resides. Thousands of pilgrims from across Tibet, Nepal, and India make the annual journey around the mountain, a sacred circuit called a Kora. Its length is about 50 kilometers, and the path passes at an altitude of more than 5,000 meters. People walk for weeks, inhaling icy air, overcoming passes, sleeping in the open air, in order to complete this circle at least once in their lives. Some do it not on foot, but in a special way, bowing to the ground at every step, stretching the journey for months. It is believed that one full pilgrimage washes away the sins of a lifetime, and 108 rounds free the soul from the wheel of rebirth. Those who have been there say that Kailash is unlike any other mountain. She seems to glow from within. Even in cloudy weather, the peak remains bright, reflecting invisible light. Sometimes rings of clouds appear above it, perfect circles like halos. Sometimes the wind comes down from its slopes, carrying a strange hum, similar to a low ringing, as if the mountain itself was singing. Scientists attribute this to the interaction of air currents and stone ledges, but for pilgrims it is the voice of Shiva, calling souls to purification. Kailash stands in the center of a majestic natural ensemble. Around it originate the 4 great rivers of Asia, the Indus, Brahmaputra, Sutlej, and Karnali. This fact seems impossible, as if the mountain itself decides the fate of the waters. Geographers call it the hydrological heart of the continent. but in ancient texts, this place is described differently, as the navel of the earth, where sky, water, and stone connect. Despite its sacredness, Kailash remains surprisingly inaccessible. Climbing attempts were made more than once, but each time ended in failure, not because of technical difficulties, but because of a feeling of sacred prohibition. In the 20th century, several expeditions received permission from China, but the climbers themselves refused. One of them, Reinhold Messner, said, "If someone climbs Kailash, the world will lose one of its last secrets." Since then, no official expedition has dared to break the silence of the summit. The top of Kailash is covered with eternal snow, but on clear days it seems that its edges are not white, but golden. When the sun sets, the light glides across the slopes, turning them into shining crystal. Pilgrims consider this moment a blessing. They fall on their faces, pronounce mantras, and singing, which seems to have no beginning and no end, is heard over the valleys. This song contains neither a request nor fear, but submission to eternity. Archaeologists and researchers note that Kailash is associated with many ancient structures and cultures. Along the roads leading to it, you can find stupas, ruins of monasteries, petroglyphs depicting suns, spirals, and stairs. Many of them date back to a time long before the advent of Buddhism. Perhaps the mountain has been revered by people since those times when neither religions nor writing existed. Its shape, a pyramid facing the sky, is so archetypal that it seems to be a symbol sewn into human memory itself. Local monks tell a legend that Kailash is not just a mountain, but a peak that connects the worlds. Under it, according to them, lies the city of the gods, Shambhala, shining in the depths of the earth. They say that on certain days of the year, the shadow of Kailash forms a perfect cross, and at this moment, an invisible transition between dimensions opens. For some, it is a myth. For others, it is a metaphor for inner enlightenment when a person connects with the world. Scientific expeditions exploring the surrounding area noted strange phenomena: compasses going astray, unstable electromagnetic activity, sudden temperature changes. Some have recorded magnetic field anomalies, although the geology of the area does not provide a simple explanation for this. But perhaps the very energy of this land, the combination of cold, height, and silence, creates the impression of a different physics. After all, at an altitude of 5,000 meters, the air becomes so thin that every sound, every step, every breath feels different. At night, Kailash seems alive. The wind descends from the glaciers, and in its rustle you can hear the breathing of the mountains. Stars flash above the peak, and their reflections seem to revolve around the peak. Pilgrims sit by the fires, warm their hands, look into the darkness, and are silent. Here the words lose their meaning. Everything that can be said already sounds in the wind. For those who have visited the foot of Kailash, this experience becomes a turning point. They say they feel not awe, but a strange peace, as if everything inside is becoming quieter. Perhaps this is the strength of this mountain, not in height, not in beauty, but in the fact that it reminds a person of his place in the world. We are not the peak, but only a part of the great breadth, and having touched eternity, we understand how a small life takes on meaning. Mount Kailash stands motionless, as it did thousands of years ago. The wind cuts its slopes, snow falls on the granite, and pilgrims walk and walk around it, carrying their prayers like fireflies in an endless night. And perhaps it is in this circle that the answer to all questions is: the world moves not up and not forward, but around what does not change. And if you listen, you can hear how, under the stars, among the cold and wind, the mountain itself whispers ancient words. Everything passes, but the sacred remains. In the northeast of Africa, where the earth seems to have opened up to meet the internal heat of the planet, stretches the Danakil Depression, one of the most extreme places on earth. Here, everything seems impossible. The air temperature often rises above 50 degrees. There is almost no rain. The air is saturated with sulfur, and the soil is boiling from underground flames. This is one of the lowest places on the planet, more than 120 meters below sea level, and one of the youngest from a geological point of view. Here, before the eyes of humanity, a new ocean is being formed. Danakil is called the gate to the underworld. From above, it resembles a burn on the body of the planet, a huge crack where the continents merge. It is part of the East African Rift, a giant fault that stretches the African plate. Millions of years later, a new sea will appear here, but for now the Earth continues to slowly move apart, and sulfur gases and lava burst out of these wounds. There are no usual colors in this landscape. Only yellow, green, scarlet, black. Everything glows, boils, smokes, and everything lives. The most famous place in the depression is the Erta Isle volcano, the mountain that burns forever. Its crater contains one of the few permanent lava lakes on Earth. It seethes and shimmers like molten metal, emitting a red glow that can be seen tens of kilometers away. At night, when darkness reigns all around, the landscape resembles a mirage. Smoke billows below, flames float above it, and waves of liquid stone crawl along the edges of the crater. This spectacle is older than history itself, the living heart of the planet, its pulse. Scientists call Erta Isle a window into the mantle, because here you can observe processes that usually occur deep underground. Every movement of lava, every splash of a bubble is the breathing of the planet. Sometimes the surface of the lake cracks, and a fountain of melt bursts out of the crack, spraying liquid stone. Then everything freezes again, and the silence becomes almost absolute. At such moments you can hear a low hum, similar to the hum of a huge organ. This is not the sound of the wind, not an earthquake. It is the Earth itself talking to its depths. The volcanic activity in Danakil creates landscapes that look like scenes from dreams. In the north of the depression is the Dalol Plateau, a real geometer's nightmare and an artist's paradise. This place seems unreal. The Earth is painted with acid and minerals in colors that are not in the usual palette: poisonous green, lemon, turquoise, ochre, purple. Fountains of boiling sulfur erupt from hundreds of craters. Crusts of salt form on the surface like glass plates. The soil is fragile under your feet, and if you stumble, acidic slurry boils beneath it. The smell of hydrogen sulfide and iron is in the air. But even here, in the kingdom of heat and poison, life finds a place for itself. In the 21st century, microbiologists discovered microorganisms in the Dalol hot springs that could survive in extreme temperatures and acidity. They feed on sulfur and iron, existing where it would seem that nothing could survive. These life forms may be similar to those that once arose on the young Earth, and perhaps they still exist on other planets. That's why Danakil is called a living laboratory of the prehistoric world. When the sun rises above the depression, the entire space turns into a red-hot illusion. The air trembles, the horizon melts, and it seems as if the Earth is swaying and breathing. In the distance, lava fields merge with clouds of dust, and the boundary between sky and Earth disappears. Even the sounds become different. The steps sound muffled, and the breath seems to get stuck in the throat. But at night, everything changes. The flames of Erta Isle paint the sky with a blood-red light, and against the backdrop of this radiance, the Afar caravans seem like shadows from another time. Their lights are reflected in the lava, like a memory of the eternal human movement through the elements. Local legends say that spirits live underground in Danakil, guarding the gates to the planet's inner fire. When the lava flares up particularly strongly, they wake up. People believe that the noise and rumble of the volcano are their voices. These beliefs seem simple, but they convey an ancient truth. Man is not the master here, but a witness. He can observe but not interfere. Despite the dangers, scientists continue to come to Danakil. Here they study the birth of the Earth's new crust, the chemical processes that form minerals, and the life forms that can exist in conditions close to extraterrestrial. It is these studies that inspire astrobiologists. After all, perhaps in the craters of Mars or under the ice of Europa, a satellite of Jupiter, there live the same tiny creatures that live today in the boiling springs of Ethiopia. Danakil is not just a place, but a living symbol of how life and death merge into one. There is no boundary between creation and destruction. Each new lava flow destroys the old land, but a new one is born in its place. The minerals that settle in the hot springs create crystals that sparkle like jewelry. Everything around reminds us that chaos is not the end, but the beginning. When you stand at the Erta Ale crater, you feel the heat rising from the depths and see how the fire licks the stones, turning them into liquid glass. No photographs can convey this moment, only the feeling of presence. The wind burns your face, your eyes sting from sulfur, but you can't look away. Before you is the breath of the planet, pristine and silent. There is no fury in this spectacle. There is peace, the peace of eternal movement that does not need witnesses. When dawn bathes Danakil in golden light, the land seems calm. But underneath this silence lies a continuous movement, like a pulse that never stops. Continents are born here, and perhaps in millions of years this place will become a new sea. In the meantime, it remains a living reminder. The planet is not a stage, but an organism. And we live on her skin, thin, trembling, breathing. The volcanoes of the Danakil Depression are a glimpse into the interior of the Earth. They show that life and death, beauty and horror, creation and destruction are not opposites, but one breath. Here a person can see not just the world, but the very process of its formation, and perhaps understand that everything that seems to be the end is just the beginning of another form of existence. On the border of 3 countries, where the Amazon jungle meets the sky, Mount Roraima rises, an ancient plateau, reminiscent of a giant altar raised above the world. Its top is flat, as if cut by the hand of a titan, and the walls are sheer and go down almost a kilometer. The clouds below float like the sea, and the top seems like an island floating in the air. This place is so unusual that even the most experienced travelers and scientists lose their sense of reality. Mount Roraima is not just a natural phenomenon. This is one of the oldest places on the planet, a silent testimony to the time when the Earth was just learning to breathe. The Roraima Plateau belongs to the so-called tepuis, mountain tables that are more than 2 billion years old. They appeared long before the continents appeared in their current form. It was once part of a huge sandstone plateau that rose above the primordial oceans. Then millions of years of rain and wind destroyed everything around, leaving only the most persistent fragments. So the tepuis turned into islands of time, pieces of prehistoric land frozen above the modern world. For the local peoples, the Paimons and the Makushi, Roraima has always been sacred. They called her the mother of all waters. 3 great rivers actually originate from its slopes: the Orinoco, the Amazon, and the Essequibo. According to legend, the mountain is the trunk of an ancient tree that once connected heaven and earth. The goddesses cut it down to stop the chaos, and its fall caused a great flood. What's left of the tree is Roraima. Its peak, according to Indian belief, is the place where the spirits of rain, clouds, and lightning live. They guard the mountain from uninvited guests, and only a few dare to climb it. The modern world learned about Roraima relatively recently. In 1838, the British traveler Robert Schomburgk described it in his notes, calling it the Table of the Gods. His reports inspired Arthur Conan Doyle's novel The Lost World, where prehistoric creatures are preserved on a mountaintop. Since then, Roraima has become a symbol of the border between myth and reality, between past and present. It's not easy to get to. The path begins in the Venezuelan savanna, among swamps, rare trees, and endless plains, where the wind carries the smell of rain. Then the climb begins through the humid jungle, where every step is accompanied by the sounds of insects and the cries of birds. The path winds between rocks and streams, rising higher and higher until clouds cover the ground and the world turns into a gray, wet timelessness. When you finally reach the top, it seems that you are crossing the border between worlds. There is silence above, thick as fog. There are no trees here, only stone covered with black lichens, mosses, and red algae. The surface of Roraima is carved with thousands of depressions similar to craters. Rainwater collects in them, forming lakes and streams. Some depressions are so deep that they contain their own ecosystems. Biologists have found species of plants and animals here that are found nowhere else on the planet. One of the most amazing inhabitants is the carnivorous Heliamphora plant, which feeds on insects. Its leaves form traps filled with rainwater, where the poor insects die. There are also frogs that live only on the top of Roraima, miniature, black as obsidian, able to curl up into a ball and roll down the slope if disturbed. All this makes the plateau a real living museum, where time stood still millions of years ago. But the main thing that a person feels at the top is the presence of silence. You can't hear any wind or birds here, only the soft sound of water flowing down stone cracks. The clouds pass right through you, wet, cold, dense. Sometimes they break, and an abyss suddenly opens under your feet, into which the earth disappears. At this moment you realize that you are standing on the border of heaven and earth. Roraima is constantly shrouded in mysticism. Strange light phenomena are often observed from the top, auroras, flashes that do not look like lightning. Scientists explain this by electrical discharges arising from high humidity and air friction. But for local residents, these are manifestations of the spirits of the mountain. They say that if a person rises to the top with bad thoughts, she will not allow him to leave. Indeed, fog often descends suddenly, closing the trails. Travelers talk about strange sounds, like whispers coming from the stone, and how compasses go crazy here. Geologists confirm magnetic anomalies do exist on Roraima. Local rocks contain a high percentage of iron, creating local magnetic fields. But observing this, even scientists recognize that there is something more to this place than physics. Здесь все подчинено ритму, который человек не способен измерить. Among the many legends about Roraima, there is one that especially accurately conveys the spirit of this place. They say that the top of a mountain is a mirror in which the earth sees the sky. When spirits come here at night, they look into it to remember who they are. Perhaps this is why travelers who have visited the plateau often say that Roraima changes a person. She doesn't give answers, but she makes you ask questions that live deeper than words. On the eastern edge of the plateau, there is a place where the stone ends in a sheer wall. From there, you can see a valley flooded with clouds. As the sun rises above the horizon, the clouds turn gold and the moisture on the rocks begins to sparkle. You stand on the edge of the world, and you feel that the breath of the wind is the breath of the planet itself. Photographs of Roraima often convey her beauty, but do not convey her essence, because it cannot be understood with the eyes. This place is felt by the skin, breathing, and internal hearing. There are no familiar landmarks here. Sky and earth change places, the horizon disappears, and only the feeling of the presence of something eternal remains. Travelers who spend the night on the plateau say that at night it lives its own life. In the darkness, you can hear the dripping of water, the rustling of moss, and sometimes a low, vibrating hum, as if the mountain is singing. Maybe it's the wind passing through the cracks, or maybe it's the memory of the earth that sounds to those who know how to listen. Roraima is a place where nature seems intelligent. She doesn't just exist, she observes. Every stone here seems to know that you have come, and you begin to look at the world differently, not as a decoration, but as a living being to which you belong. When dawn awakens the peak, the clouds move down and the plateau takes shape again. The sun is reflected in the puddles, drops of water sparkle on the stones, and everything around becomes transparent. At this moment, it seems that the world has reset to zero, that everything is starting anew. Roraima reminds, time does not move forward, it rotates. Everything goes back to where it started. Down in the valley, life goes on as usual. People, villages, roads, cities. But here, above, everything remains unchanged, just like millions of years ago. This place is a witness, preserving the memory of the planet. And maybe that's why Roraima is so fascinating. She is silent, but in her silence everything can be heard. The sound of the wind, the pulse of the earth, the breath of the clouds, even the echo of that time when there was no man yet. When you leave the top, it seems that you are not going down, but back, into a dream, into everyday life. The stone gives way to greenery, then the jungle, then the sound of water. But somewhere inside there remains that feeling that cannot be forgotten, as if you had touched the very heart of the world. Roraima